Welcome, Night Wanderer. You found your sanctuary for sleep. This evening, we're going to explore the timeless wonder of the Great Pyramids of Egypt, where ancient pharaohs defied gravity and time itself to create monuments that have stood for thousands of years. We'll journey through the ingenuity of forgotten engineers, the ambitions of mighty rulers, and the enduring mysteries that continue to captivate us today. Accompanied by soothing music and abstract imagery, we'll be uncovering little-known wonders and fascinating stories that gently feed your curiosity as you drift towards sleep. If you enjoy these calm adventures with us, don't be shy. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment to help other smart sleepers dream too. And now, take a deep breath, let your body sink into comfort, and allow your mind to rest and your eyes to close as the tale unfolds before you. The story of the pyramids begins not with stone or pharaohs, but with water. Long before the first block was quarried or the first architect dreamed of reaching toward the sky, the Nile River carved its path through a landscape that would become one of history's greatest civilizations. 10,000 years ago, the land we now call Egypt looked remarkably different from the desert expanses that frame the pyramids today. The climate was wetter, gentler. Where sand dunes now roll endlessly, grasslands once stretched toward distant horizons. Scattered acacia trees provided shade for grazing animals. Small groups of hunters followed herds across these ancient savannas, unaware that their descendants would one day command the construction of monuments that would outlast empires. The Nile has always been the constant heartbeat of this land. Born in the highlands of East Africa, this mighty river flows northward through thousands of miles before spreading into the Mediterranean Sea. But it was the river's annual flooding that would prove truly transformative. Each year, with dependable rhythm, the waters would rise and spread across the floodplain, depositing rich, dark silt carried from distant mountains. When the floods receded, they left behind soil of extraordinary fertility, a narrow ribbon of life-giving earth cutting through increasingly arid terrain. Around 8,000 years ago, as the climate gradually became drier across North Africa, the grasslands began their slow retreat. The animals that had sustained nomadic hunters migrated elsewhere or dwindled in number. The scattered human groups faced a choice: follow the fading grasslands or adapt to the changing world. Many moved toward the one place where water and fertility remained reliable. They moved toward the Nile. These early settlers discovered that the river's generosity allowed something their ancestors had never known: permanence. Instead of following game across vast distances, they could plant seeds in the rich silt and watch crops grow. Emmer wheat and barley, first domesticated in the Fertile Crescent to the northeast, found ideal conditions in the Nile's floodplain. Year after year, the river's floods renewed the soil, making it unnecessary to move in search of fresh land. For the first time, people could truly settle down. Small villages appeared along the riverbanks. These early communities were modest, their homes constructed from the materials the river valley provided. Papyrus reeds, abundant in the marshes, could be bundled and woven. Mud from the riverbank, mixed with straw and dried in the reliable sunshine, formed bricks that provided shelter from the heat. These simple structures required no quarrying, no elaborate planning, yet they represented a profound shift in human existence. People were putting down roots. The Nile did more than provide water and fertile soil. It became Egypt's highway, a natural transportation route that connected communities separated by dozens or hundreds of miles. The river's current carried boats northward toward the Mediterranean, while the prevailing winds blew from north to south, allowing sails to carry vessels upstream. This fortunate combination meant that trade and communication flourished between settlements that might otherwise have remained isolated. Ideas traveled along the river just as surely as goods did. Archaeological evidence reveals that these early farming communities gradually grew more sophisticated. Simple pottery gave way to decorated vessels. Stone tools became more specialized and refined. The surplus food that successful farming provided meant that not everyone needed to work in the fields. Some individuals could specialize in crafts, developing skills in pottery making, tool manufacture, or weaving. This specialization marked another crucial step toward complexity. Over centuries, the scattered villages began to develop distinct identities. In Upper Egypt, the narrow river valley hemmed in by cliffs, communities shared certain pottery styles and burial customs. In Lower Egypt, where the Nile found out into the delta, a different set of traditions emerged. These regional differences suggest that early Egyptian culture was not uniform but rather a tapestry of related but distinct communities, each adapting to their specific environment while sharing the fundamental bond of the river. The dead became important markers of this evolving society. The earliest Egyptians buried their deceased in simple pit graves at the desert's edge, beyond the reach of the annual floods. The hot, dry sand naturally preserved the bodies, leading to an accidental discovery that would profoundly influence Egyptian culture. The dead, it seemed, did not simply vanish but could persist in recognizable form. This observation may have planted the seeds for beliefs about the afterlife that would eventually find expression in the pyramids themselves. As communities grew larger and more prosperous, their burials became more elaborate. The simple pit graves evolved into more complex structures. Some deceased were buried with pottery vessels, presumably containing food and drink for a journey beyond life. Stone tools, jewelry made from shells and semi-precious stones, even simple figurines accompanied the dead. These grave goods tell us that even in these early periods, Egyptians were contemplating existence beyond death and preparing for it with tangible offerings. The settlements themselves grew from villages into towns. Walls appeared around some communities, constructed from mud brick and rising high enough to provide both protection and prestige. These fortifications suggest that life along the Nile was not always peaceful. Competition for the best land, disputes over water rights, or simple human conflict required some communities to defend themselves. Leadership emerged, individuals or families who could organize defense, mediate disputes, and coordinate the communal activities that farming required. By around 5,000 years ago, the scattered communities along the Nile had coalesced into larger political units. Dozens of small settlements recognized common leaders and shared identities. These early kingdoms, which scholars call nomes, controlled stretches of the river valley. They had standards and symbols, early hieroglyphs that identified them. They built larger structures for their leaders, including more substantial tombs. The dead of the elite were now buried in rectangular mud brick structures called mastabas, their flat tops resembling the benches from which they take their name. The stage was being set for something unprecedented. The Nile had nurtured communities from scattered bands into organized societies. The reliable floods had created agricultural surplus, which supported specialized craftspeople. The river had connected communities and allowed ideas to flow. The desert sands had shown that preservation beyond death was possible, inspiring increasingly elaborate preparations for the afterlife. And the mud brick architecture of homes, walls, and mastabas had taught builders fundamental principles of construction. All of these elements, slowly accumulating over millennia, would soon combine in ways that no one could have predicted. The villages by the Nile were about to become a unified kingdom, and that kingdom would soon attempt something that had never been done before. The age of the pyramids was approaching, though the people living in this pivotal moment could not have known that their world stood on the threshold of transformation. An architect named Imhotep and a pharaoh named Djoser would soon change everything. The sun rose over the sands of Saqqara in the year 2630 BCE, casting long shadows across a landscape that would soon be transformed forever. A new pharaoh had ascended to the throne of unified Egypt, a ruler named Djoser, whose name would echo through millennia not for conquest or wealth, but for a vision that reached toward the sky. Djoser inherited a land that had been building tombs for its elite for generations. These structures, called mastabas, were rectangular buildings with flat roofs and sloping sides, constructed primarily from mud brick. They dotted the desert edge like low tables, which is indeed what their Arabic name suggests. Inside these modest monuments, the wealthy and powerful of Egypt were laid to rest with provisions for the afterlife. They were practical, traditional, and completely unremarkable by the standards that were about to emerge. The young pharaoh had at his side a man whose genius would reshape not only Egyptian architecture but the very concept of monumental building itself. His name was Imhotep, and while his exact background remains somewhat mysterious to us, the titles he bore speak volumes about his extraordinary capabilities. He was the high priest of Heliopolis, the overseer of royal works, and a physician of such renown that later generations would deify him as a god of medicine and wisdom. In an age when most people's names vanished like footprints in sand, Imhotep's name was carved into history alongside his king's. Together, these two men contemplated something unprecedented. The exact conversation, if there was one defining moment, is lost to time. But the archaeological evidence speaks clearly about what they decided to create. Djoser's eternal resting place would not be another mud brick mastaba. It would be something entirely new, built from the most permanent material available, constructed on a scale that had never been attempted. The location chosen for this revolutionary project was the necropolis at Saqqara, on the west bank of the Nile, across from the ancient capital of Memphis. The western desert held deep symbolic meaning for the Egyptians. It was the realm where the sun god Ra descended each evening, the direction of endings and beginnings, of death and rebirth. Here, on a commanding plateau overlooking the fertile valley, Imhotep began his masterwork. The innovation started simply enough. Rather than mud brick, the tomb would be built from limestone blocks quarried from the surrounding cliffs. The decision to work in stone was itself revolutionary. Stone was permanent, eternal, fitting for a god-king who would live forever in the afterlife. But stone was also extraordinarily difficult to work with, requiring entirely new techniques and tools. Each block needed to be cut, shaped, transported, and precisely placed. The initial design may have been for a traditional mastaba, simply rendered in stone rather than brick. But as construction progressed, something remarkable happened. Perhaps it was Imhotep's vision from the beginning, or perhaps the idea evolved as the work advanced. The flat-topped mastaba began to grow upward. A second level was added atop the first, slightly smaller than the one below. Then a third level, smaller still. The structure rose in 6 distinct steps, each level set back from the one beneath it, creating a massive stairway ascending toward the heavens. The symbolism was unmistakable. This was a ladder for the pharaoh's soul to climb, a staircase connecting the earth to the sky, the mortal realm to the eternal dwelling place of the gods. The step pyramid, as it would come to be known, stood nearly 200 feet high when completed, dominating the landscape for miles around. The engineering challenges Imhotep faced were immense. Unlike mud brick, which could be molded and stacked with relative ease, stone blocks needed to be precisely cut and fitted. The weight of the upper levels had to be supported by the structure below. The internal chambers and passages required careful planning to prevent collapse. Yet somehow, with tools of copper and stone, with knowledge accumulated through careful observation and experimentation, Imhotep and his workers solved each problem as it arose. The limestone blocks used in construction were notably smaller than those that would be employed in later pyramids. They were roughly the size of large bricks, making them manageable for workers to handle and transport. This choice reflected both the experimental nature of the project and a practical understanding of limitations. No one had built anything like this before. Caution, combined with ambition, guided every decision. Surrounding the step pyramid, Imhotep designed an entire complex enclosed by a massive limestone wall. This boundary wall stretched over a mile in length, standing 30 feet high, punctuated by bastions that gave it the appearance of a fortified palace. Within this enclosed space stood chapels, courtyards, and ceremonial buildings, all carved from stone, all part of an elaborate setting for the pharaoh's eternal existence. Many of these structures were not functional in the practical sense. Their doors didn't open, their rooms had no true interiors. They were symbolic architecture, representations in stone of the buildings Dosa would need in the afterlife. The complex included two curious structures known as the North and South buildings, their exact purpose still debated by scholars. There were shrines for various gods, storerooms for offerings, and a large courtyard where ritual ceremonies would take place. Every element was carefully planned and executed, creating not just a tomb but an entire city of eternity. When the work was finally complete, the step pyramid complex stood as testimony to human achievement and divine aspiration combined. It was the tallest structure in the world at the time, visible for many miles across the flat delta. It announced to all who saw it that Egypt had entered a new era, one where pharaohs commanded not just armies and harvests, but the very stones of the earth itself. Imhotep's name was inscribed at the base of a statue of Pharaoh Dosa, an honor almost never bestowed upon anyone but royalty. This simple act of recognition acknowledged the profound truth that great monuments require great minds to conceive and create them. The step pyramid was not merely Dosa's tomb. It was Imhotep's masterpiece. The structure still stands today, 46 centuries after its completion, weathered by wind and time but fundamentally intact. It remains the oldest surviving large-scale stone structure in the world, the foundation upon which all subsequent pyramid construction would build. The path from Dosa's stepped monument to the smooth-sided perfection of the Great Pyramids at Giza was neither straight nor simple, but it began here, in this moment of unprecedented ambition, when two men looked at mud brick and imagined eternity in stone. The success of Imhotep's step pyramid had ignited something profound in the Egyptian imagination. The monument at Saqqara stood as proof that stone could reach toward the heavens, that human ambition could be made permanent in limestone and granite. Yet the path from Dosa's stepped structure to the smooth-sided pyramids that would eventually grace the Giza plateau was neither straight nor simple. Between these two architectural achievements lies a fascinating period of experimentation, where pharaohs and their master builders pushed the boundaries of what was possible, learned from spectacular miscalculations, and gradually refined the techniques that would produce the world's most enduring monuments. In the generations following Dosa's reign, several pharaohs attempted to create their own eternal monuments, each trying to improve upon what had come before. These intermediate pyramids, some successful and others dramatically flawed, reveal something remarkable about the ancient Egyptian approach to monumental architecture. Rather than following a single, unchanging blueprint, these builders were engaged in an ongoing process of innovation, adapting their methods as they encountered new challenges and discovered better solutions. The pyramid at Medum stands as one of the most intriguing examples of this experimental period. Located approximately 50 miles south of modern Cairo, this structure began its existence as a 7-step pyramid, later expanded to 8 steps, and eventually encased in limestone to create smooth sides. The transformation reflected an evolution in the Egyptian ideal of what a pyramid should be. The pure, geometric perfection of a true pyramid must have held powerful symbolic meaning, perhaps representing the primordial mound that rose from the waters of creation in Egyptian mythology, or the rays of the sun solidified in stone. Yet something went terribly wrong at Medum. Today, the structure rises from the desert surrounded by massive piles of rubble. Its outer casing collapsed, revealing the inner step structure like bones beneath torn skin. The pyramid's appearance is so distinctive that local inhabitants call it El Haram El Kadeb, the false pyramid. Archaeologists have long debated what caused this dramatic failure. Some believe the outer casing was added too steeply, without proper bonding to the inner steps, causing it to eventually slide away under its own weight. Others suggest that the collapse occurred in ancient times, perhaps even during construction, teaching Egyptian engineers a crucial lesson about the importance of proper foundation work and the angle at which stones must be laid. The mystery deepens when we consider that some scholars believe the collapse may have happened much later, perhaps even in medieval times when the pyramid was quarried for building materials. The truth, like so many aspects of these ancient structures, remains partially hidden beneath the desert sand and the veils of time. What we can say with certainty is that the builders of Egypt's pyramids were learning, adapting, and occasionally failing as they pushed toward architectural perfection. Pharaoh Sneferu, who ruled Egypt around 2600 BCE, became the most ambitious pyramid builder of this experimental age. The scale of his construction project staggers the imagination even today. Under his reign, more stone was quarried and shaped than during any other period in Egyptian history, including the construction of his son Khufu's Great Pyramid. Sneferu didn't build just one pyramid. He built 3 major pyramids and possibly contributed to a 4th, each one representing a different stage in the evolution of pyramid design. The most famous of Sneferu's monuments is the Bent Pyramid at Dasha, a structure whose unusual profile tells a story of architectural crisis and ingenious adaptation. Rising from the desert floor, the pyramid begins at a steep angle of approximately 54 degrees. Then, about halfway up, the angle suddenly changes to a gentler 43 degrees, giving the structure its distinctive bent appearance. For decades, archaeologists and engineers have studied this peculiar design, and the most widely accepted explanation is that the builders encountered structural problems during construction. Perhaps they observed dangerous stress cracks appearing in the internal chambers. Perhaps they recognized that the steep angle was causing instability in the structure. Whatever the specific concern, the builders made a dramatic decision: they would complete the pyramid at a safer, more stable angle. This wasn't an admission of defeat, but rather a demonstration of practical wisdom. The engineers of ancient Egypt were not working from theoretical knowledge alone. They were learning from the physical behavior of stone under tremendous weight, from the way pressure distributed through massive structures, from the relationship between angle and stability. What makes the Bent Pyramid even more remarkable is that Sneferu's builders didn't abandon the project or tear it down to start over. They adapted, they adjusted, and they completed a structure that has stood for more than 4,000 years. The pyramid's internal chambers show sophisticated architectural features, including corbelled ceilings that distribute weight away from the burial chamber, techniques that would be refined and perfected in later pyramids. Not satisfied with the Bent Pyramid, Sneferu commissioned another pyramid at Dasha, located just over a mile to the north. This structure, known today as the Red Pyramid because of the reddish limestone from which it was constructed, represents a triumph of applied learning. Built at the same gentle angle used for the upper portion of the Bent Pyramid, approximately 43 degrees, the Red Pyramid rose to become the world's first successfully completed smooth-sided pyramid. Its internal chambers soar to impressive heights, their corbelled ceilings demonstrating that Egyptian architects had mastered the challenge of creating large interior spaces within mountains of stone. Standing in the quiet desert air near these monuments, one can almost feel the presence of those ancient builders, working through problems that no human had faced before, developing solutions through a combination of mathematical knowledge, practical experience, and careful observation. These pyramids were not simply tombs, they were schools of engineering, each one teaching lessons that would inform the next generation of construction. The experimental pyramids reveal something essential about the nature of human achievement. The path to mastery is rarely direct. It wins through failures and partial successes, through moments of crisis that demand innovation, through the patient accumulation of knowledge built upon thousands of individual observations and adjustments. The ancient Egyptians didn't suddenly know how to build the Great Pyramid. They learned through decades of trial, error, and refinement. As Sneferu's reign drew to a close, Egyptian pyramid builders had accumulated an impressive body of practical knowledge. They understood the critical importance of foundation preparation, the relationship between pyramid angle and structural stability, and the techniques needed to create vast interior chambers that wouldn't collapse under millions of tons of stone. They had developed efficient systems for quarrying, transporting, and placing massive blocks with remarkable precision. The stage was set for the next great leap in pyramid construction. Sneferu's son would inherit not just a throne but generations of accumulated engineering wisdom, a workforce experienced in monumental construction, and an economy capable of supporting the most ambitious building project the world had yet seen. The sun rises over the Nile Valley in the year 2560 BCE, casting golden light across a kingdom that has learned much from its early experiments in stone. The mistakes and successes of previous generations have created a foundation of knowledge, and now Egypt stands ready for its most ambitious architectural endeavor. Into this moment of readiness steps a pharaoh whose name will echo through millennia, Khufu. The historical records that survive from Khufu's time are surprisingly sparse for a ruler who would commission such an extraordinary monument. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus, writing more than 2,000 years after Khufu's death, painted a picture of a tyrannical king who enslaved his people and closed temples to finance his grand pyramid. Yet modern archaeology tells a different story, one that reveals the limitations of relying on accounts written long after the events they describe. What we know with more certainty comes from the physical evidence Khufu left behind. His name appears in quarry marks hidden within the Great Pyramid itself, painted in red ochre by work gangs who took pride in their service to the pharaoh. These markings, discovered in the 19th century within the pyramid's relieving chambers, provide some of the most direct connections we have to Khufu himself. The work gangs bore names like the followers of the powerful White Crown of Khufu and the Companions of Khufu, suggesting a relationship between ruler and worker that was more complex than simple oppression. Khufu inherited a stable kingdom from his father, Pharaoh Sneferu, who had himself been a prolific builder. Sneferu's experiments with pyramid construction, including the Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid at Dasha, had solved many of the technical challenges that plagued earlier attempts. The son now possessed the accumulated wisdom of his father's ambitious building program, along with a kingdom whose administrative systems had been refined over generations. The Egypt of Khufu's reign was a land of extraordinary organization. The annual flooding of the Nile created a natural rhythm to life, and the pharaoh's government had learned to harness this rhythm for monumental purposes. During the inundation season, when the river covered the agricultural fields and farming was impossible, a vast workforce became available for state projects. This seasonal labor pool, combined with a core of skilled craftsmen who worked year-round, provided the human resources necessary for unprecedented construction. The decision to build a pyramid at Giza, on a plateau overlooking the ancient capital of Memphis, demonstrated strategic thinking. The location offered a solid limestone foundation capable of supporting immense weight. The nearby stone quarries provided ready access to most of the building material needed. The site's elevation made it visible for miles in every direction, a monument that would dominate the landscape and proclaim the pharaoh's power to all who approached the capital. Yet this was not merely an exercise in ego. In the religious understanding of ancient Egypt, the pharaoh served as the vital link between the divine realm and the mortal world. Upon death, the king would join the gods, particularly the sun god Ra, in his eternal journey across the sky. The pyramid itself was understood as a physical representation of this divine connection, its shape perhaps echoing the rays of the sun or providing a ramp to the heavens. For Khufu to commission such a structure was to fulfill his sacred duty, ensuring cosmic order and the continued prosperity of Egypt. The economic capability required for such a project reveals much about the sophistication of Khufu's kingdom. Egypt's wealth derived primarily from agriculture, and the Nile's predictable floods created surplus harvests that could support large populations of non-farming specialists. Grain stores administered by the state became the currency that fed pyramid workers. Evidence from later pyramids shows workers receiving rations of bread and beer, along with occasional distributions of meat, particularly during festivals. Trade networks extending beyond Egypt's borders brought materials the kingdom lacked. Copper tools came from mines in Sinai, where archaeological evidence shows Egyptian mining operations dating to this period. Cedar wood, needed for tools, sledges, and possibly scaffolding, arrived from the distant forests of Lebanon. These trade relationships required diplomatic skill and administrative coordination, suggesting a government apparatus capable of managing complex international logistics. Khufu's reign appears to have lasted approximately 23 years, based on cattle census records that mark time in ancient Egypt. This duration presented both opportunity and challenge. The pharaoh needed to complete his eternal resting place within his lifetime, which meant the project required careful planning and relentless execution from its very beginning. The pyramid that would eventually bear Khufu's name would rise to a height of over 480 feet, constructed from approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons. The few personal details we possess about Khufu come from scattered sources. A small ivory figurine, barely 3 inches tall and discovered at Abydos, provides the only three-dimensional representation of the pharaoh that survives. The statue shows a king seated on a throne, wearing the crown of Upper Egypt, his face weathered by time but still conveying dignity. This tiny object, so modest in size compared to the monument it represents, reminds us of how much remains unknown about the man who envisioned the greatest pyramid. Contemporary accounts from Khufu's time mention expeditions to distant quarries and mining operations in the desert. Inscriptions at Wadi Menkaure in Sinai show the pharaoh smiting enemies, a traditional image of royal power. These distant operations supplied essential materials for the grand project at Giza, but they also required protection and organization. The pyramid was not built in isolation but as part of a larger economic and administrative system that extended throughout Egypt and beyond. As Khufu's vision took shape in the planning stages, architects and engineers faced questions their predecessors had only partially answered. How would they organize the work of thousands of laborers? What methods would move millions of tons of stone with the tools available to them? How could they maintain precise measurements as the structure grew ever higher? The answers to these questions would require innovation, organization, and resources on a scale never before attempted. The stone itself waited in the quarries, ready to be transformed from simple limestone into something eternal. The workers prepared for their seasonal journeys to Giza. And on the plateau above Memphis, surveyors began marking out the foundation of what would become humanity's most enduring architectural achievement. With Khufu's vision declared and the royal decree issued, the most immediate challenge lay before the project organizers, obtaining millions of blocks of limestone. The pyramid would require an almost unimaginable quantity of stone, and every single piece would need to be extracted from the living rock of Egypt's quarries. The primary limestone quarry stretched across the Giza plateau itself, convenient bands of creamy stone that nature had conveniently provided within sight of where the great monument would rise. These local quarries would supply the vast majority of the pyramid's core blocks, perhaps 2 million stones or more. The ancient quarrymen studied the natural layers of limestone, understanding which strata would yield blocks of suitable quality and which contained too many flaws or impurities to be useful for construction. The extraction process began with careful examination. Experienced overseers walked along the exposed cliff faces and outcrops, running their hands over the stone, tapping with copper tools to listen for hollow sounds that might indicate hidden weaknesses. They searched for the natural bedding planes, those horizontal separations where ancient sediments had settled in layers millions of years before. These planes would become the pathways for separating stone from stone, working with the geology rather than against it. Once a suitable section was identified, teams of workers began the methodical process of isolation. They carved channels into the limestone using copper chisels and wooden mallets, creating separation trenches on 3 sides of the intended block. The rhythmic sound of metal against stone would have echoed across the quarry as dozens of workers struck in coordinated patterns, their movements synchronized by the songs they sang to maintain their pace. These work songs served multiple purposes. They maintained rhythm, they made the labor pass more quickly, and they transformed individual effort into collective accomplishment. The channels they carved were remarkably narrow, perhaps only a few inches wide, demonstrating both the skill of the quarryman and the desire to waste as little stone as possible. Workers stood or crouched in these tight spaces, striking repeatedly at the same spot until the limestone began to yield. The rock dust that resulted from this work would have filled the air with a fine white powder, settling on skin and clothing, requiring frequent water breaks both for drinking and for clearing the airways. The tools employed were simpler than one might imagine. Copper chisels formed the primary cutting implements, though copper is a relatively soft metal by modern standards. These tools required constant sharpening and replacement, which meant that tool-making became its own essential industry supporting the pyramid construction. Archaeological evidence from quarry sites has revealed discarded and broken chisels, providing tangible evidence of the wear and tear these implements endured. For the harder stones encountered in certain layers, workers employed stone pounders, balls of dolerite or other dense rock that they wielded with both hands to strike and pulverize the limestone. This technique was particularly useful for the initial roughing out of a block or for dealing with particularly resistant sections. The pounding technique required different skills than chiseling, a more forceful and less precise approach that nonetheless proved effective when properly applied. After carving channels on 3 sides and across the top, the most delicate operation remained, separating the block from the bedrock beneath. Workers created a series of slots along the base of the partially freed block and inserted wooden wedges into these openings. The wedges were then soaked with water, and as the wood expanded with moisture, it exerted tremendous pressure along the natural bedding plane. Often, this pressure alone was sufficient to crack the stone free from its ancient resting place, though sometimes additional persuasion with levers and pry bars was necessary. The moment of separation must have been both exciting and nerve-wracking. A block that had remained part of the earth for millions of years suddenly became a movable object, a component in a human design. But the separation had to occur cleanly, without shattering the stone or creating cracks that would weaken it. The skill involved in achieving this successful separation, repeated millions of times throughout the construction project, represents one of the quieter marvels of pyramid construction. Once freed, blocks required preliminary shaping while still in the quarry. Rough surfaces were dressed down, obvious protrusions removed, and basic dimensions established. This initial shaping reduced the weight that would need to be transported and also made the blocks easier to handle. Teams of masons worked with their copper chisels to create relatively flat surfaces, though the truly precise finishing work would happen later at the construction site itself. The size of individual blocks varied considerably based on their intended purpose and location within the pyramid. Core blocks, which would remain invisible inside the structure, typically measured about 3 to 4 feet in length and width, and perhaps 2 to 3 feet in height. These standardized dimensions, while varying somewhat, created blocks of manageable weight, typically between 2.5 to 5 tons. This standardization was crucial for organizing the transportation and placement of such vast quantities of stone. For the finer quality limestone that would form the outer casing of the pyramid, quarries across the Nile at Tura provided a whiter, finer-grained stone that could be polished to a brilliant finish. The Tura quarries required additional logistical complexity, as these blocks would need to be transported by boat across the river during the annual flood season when the Nile swelled with water from distant mountains. The coordination between different quarry operations, each with its own requirements and timelines, represented a significant organizational achievement. The truly massive blocks of granite, needed for special interior chambers and passages, came from quarries hundreds of miles south at Aswan. These hard, crystalline stones required even more specialized extraction techniques and would present their own transportation challenges. The granite blocks destined for the king's chamber, some weighing as much as 50 or even 80 tons, represented the extreme end of what the ancient quarrymen could accomplish. The quarrying operations never stopped. As blocks were removed, workers moved deeper into the plateau, following the quality stone wherever it led. The scars they left behind, still visible today in the excavated areas around Giza, tell the story of systematic, organized removal of stone on an almost industrial scale. These ancient quarries reveal the planning involved, with access ramps carved to allow workers to move in and out of increasingly deep excavations, and channels cut to guide the blocks toward transportation routes. Organization was everything. With multiple quarry faces operating simultaneously, with blocks at various stages of extraction and preparation, with transport teams waiting for finished blocks and toolmakers providing fresh chisels, the coordination required verged on the overwhelming. Yet the evidence suggests it worked, that the supply of stone remained steady throughout the decades of construction, that the mountain was indeed quarried, piece by carefully extracted piece, and made ready for its transformation into something that would outlast empires. The stone blocks now lay ready in the quarries, their surfaces smoothed and edges straightened, each one marked with the ochre symbols that would guide its journey. But these enormous pieces of limestone and granite faced a significant challenge before they could become part of a pyramid. They needed to travel across the desert sands, through villages, and up to the construction site on the Giza Plateau. Moving stones that weighed between 2 and 15 tons each, with some granite blocks reaching an astonishing 70 tons, required solutions as ingenious as any other aspect of pyramid construction. The ancient Egyptians left us clues about their transportation methods, though they never recorded a complete manual of their techniques. Instead, we piece together the story from tomb paintings, archaeological discoveries of actual equipment, and the marks left in the desert sand where these massive stones once traveled. One particularly revealing image comes from the tomb of Jehuti-Hotep, a nobleman who lived centuries after the Great Pyramids were built. The painting shows a colossal statue being pulled on a wooden sledge by rows of workers, while a man stands atop the statue, pouring liquid onto the sand in front of the sledge. The humble wooden sledge becomes heroic when we understand its role in pyramid construction. These sturdy platforms, built from thick planks of Lebanese cedar or native acacia wood, could distribute the weight of enormous stones across a broader surface. Rather than having the stone dig into the sand or scrape across rocky ground, the sledge created a mobile platform that reduced friction and prevented the block from becoming stuck or damaged during transport. Archaeological evidence has revealed actual sledges preserved in the dry Egyptian climate, showing us their construction methods. The planks were joined with mortise and tenon joints, and the runners were curved upward at the front to help slide over obstacles. But a sledge alone would simply sink into sand or catch on every irregularity in the ground. The Egyptians needed to create pathways suitable for moving millions of tons of stone. Evidence suggests they built specially prepared roads from the quarries to the construction sites. These weren't roads as we might imagine them today, but carefully levered tracks where workers laid down wooden beams perpendicular to the direction of travel, creating something like railroad ties. Other sections were paved with a mortar made from a clay-like material called tafla, which hardened to create a smooth, solid surface. Where the route crossed sandy areas, workers laid down temporary wooden tracks or wetted the sand to increase its firmness. The detail from that tomb painting, showing liquid being poured in front of the sledge, puzzled researchers for many years. Some suggested it was merely ceremonial, perhaps an offering to the gods for a successful journey. But modern physics experiments have revealed something remarkable about wet sand. When water is added in just the right amount, the capillary bridges that form between sand grains effectively double the material's stiffness. The sledge glides across wet sand with roughly half the force required to move it across dry sand. This simple technique, requiring only water carried in jars and poured steadily before the sledge, could reduce the number of workers needed to pull each stone by hundreds. The actual pulling of these stones required coordination on a scale that challenges our imagination. Each large block would have been attached to the sledge with ropes made from papyrus or other plant fibers, twisted and braided to create cables strong enough to withstand the tremendous forces involved. These ropes extended forward where teams of workers, sometimes numbering in the dozens or even hundreds for the largest blocks, would grip them and pull in synchronized rhythm. Evidence suggests that the workers pulled to the beat of chanted songs, with callers singing out the rhythm to ensure everyone pulled at precisely the same moment. This synchronization wasn't merely tradition, it was mechanical necessity. If workers pulled at different times, the forces would cancel each other out and potentially snap the ropes. Archaeological surveys of the Giza plateau have revealed traces of what may have been these ancient transport roads. A causeway connected the valley temple near the Nile to the construction site on the plateau, and this wasn't simply a ceremonial walkway. Its structure suggests it served as a major transportation route during construction, strong enough to support loaded sledges being hauled up its gradual incline. The causeway would have allowed workers to move stones year-round, even during the annual flooding when the Nile's waters rose high and covered much of the surrounding land. The annual flood actually provided an enormous advantage for long-distance stone transportation. When the Nile swelled with water from distant mountain rains, its waters spread across the floodplain and came much closer to the construction site than during the dry season. Granite blocks from Aswan, located 500 miles to the south, could be loaded onto boats and floated downstream during high water. The Nile became a highway of sorts, capable of carrying loads that would have been nearly impossible to move overland. Barges built specifically for heavy cargo could transport multiple blocks at once, with the river's current providing most of the motive power for the downstream journey. Evidence of ancient harbor facilities near the pyramid suggests that boats could come quite close to the construction site during flood season. Workers would then need to move the stones only a relatively short distance from the water's edge to the pyramid itself. For the heaviest granite blocks, those destined for the king's chamber or other crucial structural elements, this water transportation was probably essential. Imagine the careful navigation required to float these precious cargoes down the river, the constant monitoring to ensure the boats remained balanced, and the expertise needed to dock them safely at the pyramid harbor. But not all stones came from distant quarries. The bulk of the pyramid's limestone blocks were quarried relatively nearby, some from the Giza plateau itself. These still required transportation, though over shorter distances. For these local movements, workers may have used a different technique involving rollers placed under the sledge. Cylindrical wooden logs, positioned perpendicular to the direction of travel, could reduce friction even further than sledges alone. As the sledge moved forward, workers at the rear would pick up the rollers left behind and carry them to the front, maintaining a continuously rolling platform. This method worked well on firm, level ground, though it required perfect coordination and careful attention to keep the sledge properly balanced on the rollers. The routes from quarry to construction site became worn pathways, marked by the passage of countless stones. In some areas, archaeologists have found grooves in the bedrock where sledge runners wore down the stone over years of repeated journeys. These marks in the earth serve as silent testimony to the enormous effort involved in transportation. Each groove represents hundreds or thousands of individual trips, each one requiring the coordinated effort of dozens of workers pulling together, step by careful step, under the Egyptian sun. As the stones arrived at the pyramid site, perhaps scraped and dusty from their journey but intact and ready for placement, a new challenge emerged. These blocks needed to be lifted higher and higher as the pyramid grew, ultimately reaching heights of over 400 feet. The transportation problem transformed into a vertical challenge, requiring yet another set of ingenious solutions. But for now, the stone had completed its horizontal journey, moved by human muscle, wooden sledges, wetted sand, and carefully prepared roadways from the quiet quarry to the bustling construction site where its final destination awaited. The massive stones have been quarried from distant cliffs, dragged across sand and desert, pulled up ramps of earth and wood. But who were the people whose hands gripped the ropes? Who shaped the blocks, mixed the mortar, carried water under the burning sun? For many years, popular imagination painted these workers as enslaved masses, driven by whips and cruelty. The archaeological evidence, however, tells a remarkably different story. Along the desert plateau near the pyramids, archaeologists have uncovered extensive remains of workers' settlements, places where thousands of people lived, ate, slept, and recovered from their labors. These weren't crude prisoner camps but organized communities with substantial infrastructure. The discoveries at these sites have fundamentally changed our understanding of who built the pyramids and how they lived. The workers' village near Giza, partially excavated beginning in the late 20th century, reveals a settlement that housed perhaps 10,000 people at the height of construction. The housing consisted of long galleries with numerous rooms, built from fieldstone and mud brick. These weren't luxurious accommodations by any measure, but they provided shelter, privacy, and protection from the elements. The layout suggests careful planning, with different sections possibly designated for various work crews or specializations. What strikes researchers most powerfully is the evidence of how these workers were fed. The sheer quantity of animal bones discovered at these sites tells us something profound about the social organization behind pyramid construction. Cattle bones dominate the refuse piles, along with substantial amounts of sheep and goat. Someone was slaughtering dozens of animals daily to feed the workforce. The bakeries discovered at these sites could produce thousands of loaves each week, using grain delivered from farms throughout Egypt. This wasn't subsistence rations barely keeping people alive. This was systematic provisioning on an enormous scale. The logistics of feeding this workforce required a sophisticated administrative system. Grain had to be collected as taxation from agricultural regions along the Nile, stored in granaries, transported to the construction sites, and distributed fairly to prevent unrest. Cattle herds had to be maintained and driven to the plateau when needed. Fish from the Nile supplemented the diet, along with dates, vegetables, and beer, that staple beverage of ancient Egypt that provided both nutrition and safe hydration. The scale of this operation rivals the engineering challenge of the pyramids themselves. Medical care was available to these workers, as evidenced by skeletal remains that show healed fractures, successful amputations, and evidence of medical interventions. These weren't people who were worked to death and discarded. When a worker broke a bone, someone set it properly and gave that person time to heal. The level of care suggests these workers were valued. Their health and capability matters of genuine concern to those organizing the construction. The workforce operated on a rotation system, with evidence suggesting that laborers served in shifts, perhaps working for several months before returning to their home villages. This makes practical sense in an agricultural society where farmers needed to be present for planting and harvest seasons. During the Nile's annual flood, when fields were inundated and farming impossible, workers could travel to the pyramid sites and contribute their labor. This system allowed Egypt to mobilize enormous manpower without completely disrupting the agricultural cycle that fed the entire nation. Graffiti marks on stones throughout the pyramids, left by work crews, reveal something of the social dynamics among these laborers. Crews had names, often competitive or boastful in nature, suggesting a certain pride in their work. These weren't the marks of broken slaves but of organized teams, possibly competing with each other for recognition or honors. The inscriptions reference the pharaoh, indicating that workers saw themselves as participating in a royal project, contributing to something greater than themselves. The workers included skilled craftsmen whose expertise took years to develop. Stonemasons who could shape granite to precise specifications, surveyors who could maintain alignment over hundreds of meters, carpenters who built the sledges and ramps, metalworkers who maintained the copper tools. These specialists likely worked year-round, forming a permanent cadre of experienced builders who trained new workers and ensured quality standards were maintained. Alongside the specialists, a much larger force of less skilled laborers provided the muscle for hauling, lifting, and moving materials. These workers came from villages throughout Egypt, fulfilling what was probably a form of national service or labor tax. Rather than paying taxes in grain or goods, families contributed labor. This system, which the ancient Egyptians would use for centuries, allowed the state to mobilize massive workforces for public projects while maintaining social cohesion. The archaeological record shows that families sometimes accompanied workers to these sites. Small objects, children's toys, and domestic artifacts suggest that the workers' villages weren't exclusively male domains but included women and children. This domestic presence would have provided essential services like textile production, food preparation, and the myriad daily tasks that keep any community functioning. Life in these villages wasn't easy, certainly. The work was physically demanding, the climate harsh, accidents inevitable despite precautions. Yet the evidence consistently points away from the image of brutal enslavement and toward something more nuanced, a system where workers were organized, fed, housed, and cared for because the success of the entire project depended on their strength and skill. These workers left their marks quite literally on history, their fingerprints preserved in mud brick, their tool marks visible on dressed stone, their bones resting in simple graves near the monuments they helped create. They were farmers and craftsmen, fathers and sons, people who spent portions of their lives contributing to projects that would outlast their civilization by millennia. Understanding their lives, their communities, and their working conditions brings us closer to comprehending not just how the pyramids were built, but why such enormous projects were even possible. The answer lies not in oppression but in organization, not in cruelty but in systematic provisioning and social structures that could channel the labor of thousands toward a singular, extraordinary purpose. The workers who labored on the pyramids lived lives governed by routine and ration, as we've seen. But the monuments they created would not have been possible without the minds that directed their efforts, the architects, engineers, and astronomers who transformed pharaonic vision into geometric reality. Behind every block positioned with exacting care lay calculations that still impress modern engineers, measurements so precise they seem to defy the limitations of ancient technology. The Great Pyramid stands as a testament to mathematical sophistication that took centuries to develop. Its base forms a square whose sides differ in length by no more than a few centimeters across a distance of more than 230 meters. Each side aligns to the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, with an accuracy that deviates by only a fraction of a single degree. Such precision was no accident, nor the result of fortunate guesswork. It emerged from systematic observation, careful planning, and technical knowledge accumulated across generations of Egyptian builders. The ancient Egyptians possessed no magnetic compasses, no satellite positioning, no laser levels. Yet they achieved what would challenge even modern construction teams working with advanced equipment. They did so by looking upward, to the unchanging patterns of the night sky. The stars became their instruments, the heavens their blueprint. To orient the pyramids with such remarkable accuracy, Egyptian astronomers likely employed a method known as the Indian circle or simultaneous transit technique. On a clear night, they would have observed a circumpolar star, one that never sets below the horizon as it wheels around the celestial pole. Using a simple tool called a bay, essentially a straight rod with a plumb line, observers could mark the position where the star rose in the east and where it set in the west as it circled through the night. The line bisecting these 2 points would run perfectly north-south. Night after night, Egyptian astronomers refined their observations, achieving the extraordinary precision we still measure today. The tools for such observations were elegant in their simplicity. A leveled circular wall, built with care and patience, could serve as an artificial horizon. From the center, sighting instruments allowed priests or engineers to mark stellar positions. Water-filled channels ensured perfect levelness across vast distances, as water seeks its own level regardless of terrain. These methods required no complex machinery, only patience, clear desert skies, and generations of accumulated knowledge about the movement of celestial bodies. Mathematics governed every aspect of pyramid planning. The ancient Egyptians used a counting system based on tens, much like our own, but they wrote fractions in a unique way that influenced their architectural proportions. They understood geometry not merely as abstract theory but as practical problem solving. The seat, their unit for measuring slope angles, allowed builders to maintain consistent inclines as the pyramid rose toward the sky. A seat specified how many palms the face of the pyramid sloped inward for every cubit it rose vertically. This practical measurement system meant that workers at any level of the pyramid could check their work against a standard, ensuring the structure maintained its intended shape from base to apex. Surveying the construction site began long before the first stone arrived. Engineers needed to prepare a foundation that was both perfectly level and accurately square. On the Giza plateau, this meant cutting into the limestone bedrock in some areas while building up others. The leveling of the Great Pyramid's base platform represents an achievement that still impresses modern surveyors. Across more than 5 hectares, the base deviates from true level by no more than 2 centimeters. On a surface that size, such precision seems almost impossible without modern instruments. Yet the Egyptians had their methods. Water channels cut into the bedrock and filled to a uniform height could establish a reference level. Wooden stakes placed throughout these channels could be marked at the water line, creating multiple reference points across the entire construction area. Workers could then cut down high areas and fill in depressions until the entire foundation matched the marks on the stakes. Time-consuming, certainly, but effective beyond question. Creating perfect right angles at the pyramid's corners required equal ingenuity. The Egyptians understood what we now call the Pythagorean theorem, that a triangle with sides measuring 3, 4, and 5 units will always contain a right angle, more than 1,000 years before Pythagoras was born. By stretching ropes marked with knots at precise intervals, forming these 3-4-5 triangles, surveyors could establish perfectly square corners for the pyramid base. These carpidonapti or rope stretchers appear in Egyptian art and texts, their craft essential to the precision we admire today. The cubit served as the fundamental unit of measurement, approximately equal to the length of a forearm from elbow to fingertip. But Egyptian builders used a standardized royal cubit, defined by stone and wooden measuring rods that ensured consistency across the entire project. Subdivided into 7 palms, each further divided into 4 digits, the royal cubit allowed remarkably fine measurements when needed while remaining practical for everyday use on the construction site. Calculating the volume of stone required, the number of workers needed, the time each phase would demand, all this required sophisticated numerical literacy. Papyri that survive from ancient Egypt show mathematical problems that explore areas, volumes, and proportions. The Moscow Mathematical Papyrus and the Rind Mathematical Papyrus reveal a society comfortable with complex calculations, where scribes learned to compute the volume of pyramids and the amount of grain needed to feed work crews numbering in the thousands. Every measurement echoed through the entire structure. A small error at the base would compound as the pyramid rose, potentially throwing off the apex by meters. The internal chambers and passages also required precise planning from the very beginning, as they would be built into the structure as it grew. The ascending and descending passages, the Grand Gallery, the King's Chamber, all needed to be positioned accurately within the overall design, their locations calculated before the first course of stones was laid. Egyptian architects likely worked with scale models and detailed plans drawn on papyrus or limestone flakes called ostraca. Several such architectural drawings have survived from ancient Egypt, showing buildings plotted on grids with measurements carefully noted. For a project as ambitious as the Great Pyramid, the planning documents must have been extensive, though time has claimed most such perishable materials. The astronomical alignments extended beyond mere cardinal orientation. Shafts within the Great Pyramid point toward specific stars that held religious significance for the ancient Egyptians. These weren't random choices but reflected deep beliefs about the afterlife and the pharaoh's journey among the stars. The precision required to align narrow passages towards celestial targets while embedded deep within millions of tons of stone speaks to planning that integrated religious purpose with technical execution. As we imagine these ancient engineers working by lamplight, consulting their star charts and mathematical calculations, we see a civilization that combined practical skill with intellectual sophistication. The pyramids weren't merely piled up through brute force and endless labor. They rose according to plan, guided by minds that understood proportion, alignment, and the relationship between earthly construction and cosmic order. With these plans perfected and the foundation prepared to exacting standards, the actual construction could begin, the monumental task of stacking stone upon stone toward the sky. With the foundation laid and the precise measurements marked upon the level bedrock, the ancient builders now faced their greatest challenge, raising millions of stone blocks skyward, layer upon carefully constructed layer, until Khufu's pyramid would stand as tall as a modern 40-story building. The construction began at the base, where the massive casing stones of fine Jura limestone were positioned with extraordinary care. These outer blocks, each weighing between 2 and 15 tons, would form the smooth, gleaming surface that would one day reflect the Egyptian sun like a beacon visible for miles across the desert. Behind these prestigious outer stones, the core blocks of local limestone filled the interior, creating the mountain's solid heart. As each course of stones was completed, the builders faced an increasingly complex problem: how to raise the next layer of blocks higher and higher as the pyramid grew. The evidence suggests they employed ramps, though the exact configuration of these temporary structures remains one of archaeology's enduring puzzles. A single straight ramp extending from ground level would have needed to be lengthened and raised with each new course, eventually becoming longer than the pyramid itself and requiring nearly as much material to build. More likely, the builders used a combination of ramp systems that evolved as construction progressed. For the lower courses, external ramps approaching from one or more sides may have provided the necessary access. Some evidence suggests a spiral ramp that wrapped around the pyramid's exterior, rising with each circuit like a path up a mountain. Others propose internal ramps within the pyramid structure itself, though this theory presents its own engineering complexities. As teams of workers hauled stones up these inclined paths on wooden sledges, other crews were already preparing the next course. Masons shaped and fitted each block, leaving minimal gaps between stones. The precision achieved at such heights, without modern leveling equipment, speaks to the skill of the ancient surveyors who constantly checked and rechecked measurements as the structure climbed toward the sky. The placement of the internal chambers presented particular challenges. The king's chamber, positioned deep within the pyramid's mass, required the installation of massive granite blocks transported from quarries 500 miles to the south. Some of these ceiling beams weigh an estimated 50 to 80 tons each. Raising such enormous weights up the increasingly steep incline demanded exceptional engineering solutions. The builders may have used counterweights, multiple ramp systems, or leverage techniques that allowed relatively small forces to move tremendous masses through patient, careful effort. Above the king's chamber, the builders constructed a series of relieving chambers, 5 separate spaces stacked one above another, each topped with massive granite beams. The uppermost chamber features a pointed roof made of limestone blocks angled to redirect the weight of the pyramid's mass away from the vulnerable spaces below. This sophisticated understanding of weight distribution ensured that the king's chamber would not collapse under the crushing pressure of millions of tons of stone. The Grand Gallery presented another architectural marvel within the rising structure. This ascending passage, nearly 30 feet high and over 150 feet long, narrows as it rises through a series of corbelled stones, each course projecting slightly inward from the one below. The purpose of this extraordinary internal feature continues to generate discussion among researchers. Some suggest it served as a storage space for granite plugs that would seal the pyramid after the pharaoh's burial. Others propose it functioned as part of the construction process itself, perhaps housing a system of ramps or counterweights used to position the heaviest stones. As the pyramid rose higher, the working surface at the top grew smaller with each completed course. Hundreds of workers who had spread across the broad lower levels now found themselves confined to an increasingly cramped workspace. the coordination required to keep stones flowing upward while work crews, tools, and materials all competed for limited space demanded exceptional organizational ability from the overseers managing the project. The workers maintained their accuracy through methods both simple and ingenious. Wooden right-angle instruments helped ensure corners remained true. Plumb bobs confirmed vertical alignment. Long wooden boards with attached measuring cords allowed surveyors to check that each course remained level and that the pyramid's faces maintained their intended slope. As the structure grew taller, checking alignments with celestial references became more important, ensuring that the carefully planned astronomical orientations remained precise throughout construction. Water, always precious in the desert, played a crucial role throughout the building process. Workers needed constant hydration in the scorching heat. The mortar binding stones together required water for mixing. Some researchers suggest that thin layers of wet clay or gypsum mortar between stones may have made the final positioning of heavy blocks easier, allowing them to slide slightly until perfectly placed before the mortar set. The corners of the pyramid demanded special attention. These were the reference points from which all other measurements derived, the anchors ensuring that the four faces would meet precisely at the apex hundreds of feet above. Teams of skilled workers specialized in corner construction, their expertise essential to maintaining the geometric precision that has amazed observers for millennia. As construction approached the pyramid's upper reaches, the builders prepared to position the pyramid ion, the capstone that would crown their achievement. Though the Great Pyramid's pyramid ion has long since vanished, other pyramids preserve evidence suggesting these apex stones received special treatment, sometimes covered in gold or electrum to catch the sun's first and last rays. The installation of this final stone marked a moment of triumph, the completion of years of coordinated human effort. Throughout the decades of construction, the ramps that had enabled the building process now required careful removal. As the workforce dismantled these temporary structures, the pyramid's true form emerged, its smooth limestone casing revealing the geometric perfection that had been the builder's goal from the first stone laid upon bedrock. The debris from the ramps, the worn tools, the broken pottery that had carried water to thirsty workers, all of this evidence of the construction process was cleared away or buried beneath the desert sand, leaving the pyramid to stand as if it had simply materialized through divine will rather than human persistence. The completed structure rose 481 feet into the Egyptian sky, its base covering more than 13 acres. For 3,800 years, it would remain the tallest human-made structure on Earth, a record unsurpassed until medieval cathedrals finally reached higher. But the pyramid itself was only the centerpiece of something larger, a complex of temples, causeways, and subsidiary structures that transformed the Giza plateau into a landscape of monuments, each element connected to the others through both physical pathways and religious purpose. As the last stones were set in place at the pyramid's peak, and the gleaming white limestone casing reflected the Egyptian sun across the desert, an observer might have thought the work complete. But the pyramid itself, magnificent as it stood against the sky, represented only one element of a much grander design. The ancient Egyptians conceived of these monuments not as solitary structures, but as the centerpiece of elaborate complexes that spread across the plateau, each building and pathway serving specific purposes in the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. The pyramid complex began at the edge of the Nile's floodplain, where a valley temple rose from the fertile soil. These structures, built from the same limestone and granite that formed the pyramids themselves, greeted funeral processions arriving by boat along the river. The Valley Temple of Khafre, remarkably well preserved even today, gives us a sense of what these buildings must have been like. Massive granite pillars supported alabaster ceilings, and the filtered light created an atmosphere of solemn reverence. Here, the initial rituals took place, the first steps in the complex ceremonies that would transform a deceased pharaoh into a divine being ready to join the gods. From the Valley Temple, a covered causeway stretched across the desert floor, rising gradually toward the pyramid itself. These ceremonial pathways, some extending for nearly half a kilometer, were architectural marvels in their own right. Walls of limestone enclosed the passage on both sides, rising high enough to create a corridor sealed from the outside world. The inner walls bore carved reliefs depicting scenes from the pharaoh's life, his military victories, his offerings to the gods, and processions of tribute bearers from distant lands. The ceiling overhead protected the sacred path from the harsh desert sun, though narrow openings allowed slits of light to illuminate the journey. Walking along these causeways must have been a profound experience. The footsteps of priests echoed off stone walls as they moved between the earthly realm near the river and the eternal realm represented by the pyramid. These passages served practical purposes during construction, providing protected routes for workers and materials, but their true significance lay in their ceremonial function. After the pharaoh's death, his mummified body would travel this path one final time, moving from the place of purification toward his eternal resting place. The causeway terminated at the mortuary temple, built directly against the pyramid's eastern face. These temples were substantial structures, rivaling many standalone buildings in their complexity and grandeur. The mortuary temple served as the primary location for ongoing rituals and offerings that would sustain the pharaoh's Ka, his spiritual essence, throughout eternity. Unlike the valley temple, which saw use only during the initial funeral ceremonies, the mortuary temple remained an active site of worship for generations, sometimes for centuries after the pharaoh's death. Within these temples, priests maintained daily routines as regular as the sun's journey across the sky. They presented offerings of food and drink at altars, burned incense before statue shrines, and recited prayers that had been carefully inscribed on papyrus and temple walls. Archaeological excavations have revealed the foundations and floor plans of these temples, showing us courtyards open to the sky, columned halls, storage chambers for ritual equipment, and sanctuaries where the most sacred ceremonies took place. At Khafre's complex, 5 boat pits were carved into the rock near the mortuary temple, each shaped to hold a full-sized vessel, though whether these boats were real or symbolic remains a matter of scholarly discussion. The pyramid complexes also included smaller pyramids, often positioned near the main structure. These subsidiary pyramids, sometimes called Queen's Pyramids, housed the burials of royal wives and daughters. At Khufu's complex, 3 such pyramids stand in a neat row on the eastern side, their proportions echoing the Great Pyramid itself but on a more modest scale. Each had its own small mortuary temple and was connected to the broader complex through a shared architectural language of aligned causeways and carefully planned sightlines. Beyond the immediately visible structures, the pyramid complexes extended into the surrounding landscape through administrative buildings, workshops, and storage facilities. While the sacred spaces received the finest materials and most careful attention, these practical structures supported the ongoing function of the complex. Priests and temple workers required housing, food preparation areas, and spaces to manufacture and store the countless items needed for daily rituals. Archaeological surveys using modern technology have revealed the footprints of these structures, showing how the sacred and mundane existed side by side, creating small cities of the dead that required substantial resources from the living. The layout of these complexes followed deliberate astronomical and geographical principles. The temples aligned along an east-west axis, connecting the pyramid with the rising sun that represented rebirth and renewal in Egyptian cosmology. The valley temples faced the Nile, the source of life itself, while the pyramids rose toward the western desert, the realm of the dead where the sun completed its daily journey. Every element of the complex reinforced the theological understanding that positioned the pharaoh as an intermediary between the human and divine realms. Water systems within the complexes reveal sophisticated engineering that complemented the architectural grandeur. Some temples featured purification pools where ritual cleansing took place before ceremonies. Drainage systems carried away water used in daily temple maintenance, channeling it through carefully constructed conduits that prevented erosion and maintained the integrity of the structures. The management of water in this desert environment required planning and technical knowledge that matched the challenges of building the pyramids themselves. The decoration and furnishing of these temple spaces transformed architectural shells into active ritual environments. Though time and treasure hunters have stripped most complexes of their original contents, excavations have recovered fragments that hint at their former glory. Pieces of statuary show the fine craftsmanship of royal portraits and divine images. Fragments of relief carving display the artistic skill that transformed flat stone surfaces into narratives of power and piety. Traces of paint reveal that these spaces were once alive with color, reds and blues and yellows, bringing warmth to the cool stone. As dynasties passed and new pharaohs rose to power, some complexes remained active centers of worship while others gradually fell into neglect. The resources required to maintain these sites were substantial, and as the Pyramid Age gave way to new burial traditions, the focus of royal attention shifted elsewhere. Yet even in decline, these complexes retained their sacred character, and later generations sometimes restored or repurposed structures built by their distant ancestors. The pyramid complex thus reveals itself as a complete architectural statement, a physical manifestation of beliefs about death, kingship, and eternity. Each element connected to every other element, creating a unified whole that served both practical and spiritual purposes. As we prepare to explore the Pyramid of Khafre and its enigmatic guardian in the next part of our journey, we carry with us this understanding that the pyramids never stood alone, but always as the culminating monuments within carefully planned landscapes of the sacred. The second pyramid rises against the Egyptian sky with a presence that seems almost to rival its older neighbor. As we shift our gaze from the sprawling complex that surrounds the Great Pyramid, we turn our attention to the monument built by Khufu's son, Pharaoh Khafre, who ascended to the throne around 2558 BCE and chose to place his eternal resting place beside his father's achievement. At first glance, Khafre's pyramid appears to be the tallest structure on the Giza plateau. This optical illusion results from its placement on slightly higher ground and its steeper angle of incline. The pyramid actually stands about 3 meters shorter than the Great Pyramid, rising to approximately 143 meters at its apex. Yet what it may lack in absolute height, it compensates for in preservation. Uniquely among the Great Pyramids, Khafre's monument still retains a substantial portion of its original smooth limestone casing stones at its summit, offering visitors a glimpse of how all the pyramids once appeared when they gleamed white against the desert landscape. The casing stones at the peak of Khafre's pyramid reveal the meticulous attention ancient craftsmen paid to the final appearance of these monuments. These carefully cut and polished blocks of Jura limestone were fitted together with such precision that a knife blade could barely slip between them. The mortar used between these stones was so thin that it served more as a lubricant during placement than as a binding agent. Standing before this pyramid in the gentle light of early morning or late afternoon, one can imagine the entire structure sheathed in brilliant white, topped with a pyramid ion that may have been covered in gold or electrum, catching the sun's rays and broadcasting the pharaoh's power across the valley. Khafre's builders employed some different techniques compared to those who constructed the Great Pyramid. The internal structure is somewhat simpler, with fewer passages and chambers. The burial chamber itself is carved partly from the bedrock beneath the pyramid, a practical decision that reduced the amount of massive stone blocks needed for interior construction. 2 entrances pierce the northern face of the pyramid, though only one provides access to the burial chamber deep within. The passages descend through the pyramid's mass at carefully calculated angles, leading eventually to a simple rectangular chamber where Khafre's sarcophagus still rests, carved from a single block of granite. The mortuary complex associated with Khafre's pyramid demonstrates the full elaboration of pyramid complex design. The Valley Temple, connected to the pyramid by a long causeway, stands as one of the best preserved examples of Old Kingdom architecture. Inside this temple, archaeologists discovered the famous seated statue of Khafre, now housed in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. The statue depicts the pharaoh seated on his throne, with the wings of the falcon god Horus protectively embracing his head from behind, a powerful statement of divine kingship rendered in dark diorite stone polished to a reflective finish. But it is the Great Sphinx that draws our attention most compellingly as we explore Khafre's legacy at Giza. This colossal statue, carved from the limestone bedrock of the plateau itself, stretches more than 70 meters in length and rises 20 meters high. With the body of a lion and a human head, the Sphinx gazes eternally toward the eastern horizon, where the sun rises each morning to begin its journey across the sky. The question of who carved the Sphinx and when has occupied researchers for generations. Most Egyptologists attribute the monument to Khafre's reign, pointing to the proximity of the Sphinx to his valley temple and the stylistic similarities between the Sphinx's face and other representations of this pharaoh. The Sphinx seems to guard the approach to Khafre's pyramid complex, a royal sentinel frozen in eternal vigilance. However, some researchers have noted that no contemporary inscriptions explicitly credit Khafre with the Sphinx's creation, leaving a small window of uncertainty that has allowed alternative theories to flourish. The weathering patterns on the Sphinx's limestone body tell a story of exposure to the element over millennia. The layers of limestone from which it was carved vary in hardness, causing differential erosion that has given the monument its distinctive weathered appearance. The softer layers have eroded more quickly, while harder layers stand in slight relief. This erosion has been a subject of debate among researchers, with discussions about the rates of weathering and what they might reveal about the monument's age. Throughout history, the Sphinx has spent much of its existence buried to its neck in desert sand. Ancient pharaohs of the New Kingdom, more than 1,000 years after Khafre's time, conducted restoration efforts on the monument. Between the Sphinx's paws stands a granite stela placed there by Pharaoh Thutmose for around 1400 BCE, recording a dream in which the Sphinx promised him the throne of Egypt if he would clear away the encroaching sand. This stela confirms that even in ancient times, the Sphinx was considered an ancient monument worthy of preservation and reverence. The missing nose of the Sphinx has inspired countless legends, but historical evidence suggests it was likely removed during the medieval period, possibly during the 14th century. Drawings from earlier periods show the Sphinx with its nose intact, while later images show it damaged. Various explanations have been proposed, from deliberate iconoclasm to natural erosion, though the exact circumstances remain uncertain. Recent surveys and studies of the Sphinx have revealed additional mysteries. Seismic studies and ground-penetrating radar have detected possible cavities beneath and around the monument, though their nature and contents remain unknown. Whether these represent natural fissures in the bedrock, ancient chambers, or something else entirely continues to intrigue researchers who study the monument. The relationship between Khafre's pyramid and the Sphinx demonstrates the careful planning that went into the entire Giza plateau. The monuments were not simply placed randomly, but positioned with consideration for the landscape, the solar alignments, and the relationship between different elements of the royal funerary complex. Standing before these structures today, one can sense the coherent vision that guided their placement, a vision that sought to create a landscape where Earth reached toward sky and mortal kings prepared for their transformation into divine beings. As night settles over the Giza plateau and the stars begin to appear, the pyramid of Khafre and the enigmatic Sphinx take on a different character. The harsh edges soften in the darkness, and these monuments become silhouettes against the deepening sky, as they have for thousands upon thousands of nights. In this peaceful darkness, it becomes easier to imagine the ancient architects and builders, the priests conducting rituals, and the pharaoh himself, all long since departed, yet their works remaining as testament to human aspiration and achievement. As the evening shadows lengthened across the Giza plateau, we turn our attention now to the third and smallest of the Great Pyramids, the monument that would bear the name of Pharaoh Menkaure. Standing at just over 200 feet in height, this structure might seem diminutive compared to its towering neighbors, yet it represents something profoundly important in the story of pyramid construction, a completion of vision, a harmonious ending to the golden age of pyramid building at Giza. Menkaure ascended to the throne around 2530 BCE, inheriting a kingdom that had already devoted tremendous resources to two colossal monuments. His grandfather Khufu and his father Khafre had created structures so massive that they dominated the landscape for miles in every direction. What path would this new pharaoh choose? Would he attempt to rival their achievements in scale, or would he chart a different course? The archaeological evidence suggests that Menkaure made a deliberate choice. His pyramid, though smaller in footprint and height, would be distinguished by quality rather than sheer size. Where his predecessors had used limestone for most of their monument's surfaces, Menkaure ordered that the lower portion of his pyramid be encased in red granite brought from Aswan, over 500 miles to the south. This decision reveals something fascinating about the evolution of pyramid construction. The emphasis was shifting from overwhelming size toward refinement and precious materials. Imagine the sight of this pyramid when it stood complete, its lower courses gleaming in polished red granite, transitioning to white Jura limestone higher up, and crowned with a pyramid ion at its peak. The contrast of colors would have created a striking visual effect, a monument that caught the eye not through enormity alone but through its distinctive appearance and the obvious wealth invested in its construction. The granite casing stones presented unique challenges for the builders. Unlike limestone, which could be quarried relatively near to Giza, granite required a journey of many weeks along the Nile. This stone, formed deep within the earth under tremendous heat and pressure, possessed a hardness that made it far more difficult to work than limestone. The tools that could efficiently shape limestone blocks struggled against granite's crystalline structure. Yet the workers persevered, shaping these stones with remarkable precision, fitting them together with the same careful attention to detail that characterized all pyramid construction at Giza. Within Menkaure's pyramid complex, archaeologists have discovered evidence of hurried completion. Some of the auxiliary structures, including the mortuary temple that would have stood against the pyramid's eastern face, show signs of having been finished in mud brick rather than stone. The valley temple, connected to the mortuary temple by a long causeway, appears to have been completed after Menkaure's death, perhaps by his successor. These details whisper to us across the centuries, suggesting that something interrupted the original construction plans. Ancient sources, including the Greek historian Herodotus writing more than 2,000 years after Menkaure's reign, recorded traditions about this pharaoh. These accounts describe him as a more pious and just ruler than his predecessors, though we must treat such distant recollections with appropriate caution. What the physical evidence tells us is that the construction timeline may have been compressed, that perhaps Menkaure's reign was shorter than anticipated, requiring adaptations to complete his eternal resting place. The three Queen's pyramids that stand beside Menkaure's monument add another layer to our understanding. These smaller satellite pyramids, each a miniature version of the main structure, speak to the importance of royal women in ancient Egyptian society. One of these pyramids was intended for Queen Khamene'tep II, whose beautiful statue, discovered in the Valley Temple, now graces the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. The artistry of these subsidiary structures demonstrates that smaller scale did not mean diminished care or craftsmanship. Standing at Giza today, we can appreciate how these three pyramids create a diagonal arrangement across the plateau, each precisely positioned in relationship to the others. This was no accident of construction but a deliberate plan, executed over 3 generations of pharaohs. The alignment follows a southwest to northeast line, and some scholars have suggested celestial significance to this arrangement, while others see practical considerations of terrain and available building space. Whatever the reasoning, the result is an ensemble that feels balanced and intentional, a skyline that has defined this landscape for more than 4,000 years. The excavation of Menkaure's pyramid in the early 19th century revealed fragments of a beautiful basalt sarcophagus, intricately carved with the palace facade design characteristic of Egyptian architecture. Sadly, this artifact was lost at sea when the ship carrying it to England sank off the Spanish coast in 1838. The wooden coffin found in the same chamber proved, through later scientific analysis, to date from a much later period, suggesting that the pyramid was reopened and reused long after its original construction, a practice not uncommon in ancient Egypt's long history. The completion of Menkaure's pyramid marked the end of an era. never again would Giza see construction on such a grand scale. The focus of pyramid building would shift to other locations, and future pyramids would be smaller, less precisely constructed, though often more elaborately decorated with religious texts on their interior walls. The tremendous concentration of resources, skilled labor, and national will that had created the Giza necropolis represented a peak moment in Egyptian civilization, a time when everything seemed possible, when the power of the state could quite literally move mountains. Yet in choosing quality over size, in selecting precious granite for his monument's most visible portions, Menkaure demonstrated that grandeur could take many forms. His pyramid stands as a testament to changing priorities, to the evolution of royal display, and to the enduring human desire to create something beautiful that would outlast mortal life. As we prepare to journey inside these monuments in our next exploration, we carry with us this understanding of the Giza Plateau as a completed vision, 3 pyramids built by 3 pharaohs across 3 generations, each adding their chapter to a story written in stone, each contributing to a legacy that would echo through all of human history. The evening star rises over the western desert, casting long shadows across these ancient stones, and we rest now with the knowledge that these monuments represent not just power and ambition, but also the culmination of human skill, determination, and the eternal hope that we might leave something lasting behind. The completion of Menkaure's pyramid marked the culmination of the Giza Plateau's grandeur, but the true wonder of these structures lies not merely in their external magnificence. To understand the pyramids fully, we must venture inside, into the cool darkness where stone passages lead deep into the hearts of these ancient mountains. Imagine standing at the original entrance to the Great Pyramid, positioned on the north face some distance above ground level. The doorway itself, once concealed by smooth casing stones, opens into a passage that descends at a precise angle of 26 degrees into the bedrock below. This corridor, barely wide enough for a person to navigate without stooping, stretches downward into darkness, its walls cut through solid limestone with remarkable precision. The air grows cooler as the passage penetrates deeper, and the sounds of the outside world fade into an encompassing silence. This descending corridor eventually reaches a depth more than 300 feet below the pyramid's base, terminating in an unfinished chamber carved from the living rock. The walls of this subterranean room remain rough and incomplete, as if the builders abandoned their original plan midway through its execution. Some scholars believe this underground chamber was intended as the pharaoh's final resting place, following older traditions, before the architects revised their vision and chose to locate the burial chambers higher within the pyramid's mass. But the most fascinating feature of the Great Pyramid's interior reveals itself through another passage, one that branches upward from the descending corridor. The ascending passage, identical in its 26-degree angle but rising instead of falling, climbs through the pyramid's core. The walls here are so smooth and the construction so tight that, even after more than 4 millennia, it remains difficult to slip a piece of paper between the stones. This ascending passage leads to architectural features that continue to astound those who study them. The passage opens suddenly into a space known as the Grand Gallery, a corridor unlike any other structure from the ancient world. Picture a hall rising 28 feet high, its corbelled walls stepping inward in 7 courses until they nearly meet at the ceiling. The gallery stretches for more than 150 feet, ascending at that same precise angle, creating a cathedral-like space within the pyramid stone mass. Walking through the Grand Gallery, one notices regular slots cut into the ramps that run along either side of the central floor. These slots, combined with the corbelled design, have sparked numerous theories about their purpose. Some researchers suggest they once held wooden beams that supported blocks used to seal the ascending passage after the pharaoh's burial. Others propose they served as supports during the pyramid's construction. The truth, like so many aspects of pyramid design, remains subject to interpretation and debate. At the top of the Grand Gallery, the passage narrows again, leading to a small antechamber with vertical slots in its walls. These grooves likely held 3 massive granite slabs that could be lowered to seal the burial chamber beyond, though these portcullis blocks were found raised when the pyramid was first entered in recorded history. Beyond this antechamber lies the King's Chamber, the heart of the Great Pyramid. The King's Chamber represents a masterwork of ancient engineering. The room measures approximately 17 feet wide by 34 feet long, with a flat ceiling 19 feet above the floor. Every surface consists of polished red granite brought from quarries hundreds of miles away in Aswan. The blocks forming the walls fit together with such precision that the joints remain nearly invisible, and the chamber's proportions create remarkable acoustic properties that continue to intrigue visitors. Within this chamber sits a rectangular granite coffer, its interior dimensions precisely calculated to serve as a sarcophagus. The box, carved from a single piece of granite, shows marks from the copper saws and drills used in its creation. Curiously, this coffer was found empty and without its lid when the chamber was first accessed, leaving questions about what became of the pharaoh's burial and when the chamber might have been disturbed. Above the King's Chamber, invisible from within, lie 5 separate compartments known as the relieving chambers. These spaces, constructed with massive granite beams, serve a crucial structural purpose. The weight of the pyramid's mass pressing down from above could have crushed the King's Chamber, but these relieving chambers distribute the enormous load away from the ceiling below. The topmost of these chambers has a pointed ceiling, channeling the weight outward toward the pyramid's core. The pyramid's interior features another element that has puzzled researchers for generations. Small shafts, approximately 8 inches square, extend from both the King's Chamber and the chamber below it, known as the Queen's Chamber, despite no evidence suggesting it was intended for a queen. These narrow passages run at angles through the pyramid stone, eventually reaching the outside faces. For years, scholars believed these served as ventilation shafts, though this seems unlikely given that the Queen's Chamber shafts were originally sealed at both ends. Recent explorations using small robots equipped with cameras have revealed that these shafts contain features suggesting ritual or symbolic significance. Some terminate at stone blocks with copper fittings, while others show evidence of having been sealed deliberately. The southern shaft from the King's Chamber aligns closely with where Orion's belt would have appeared in the night sky when the pyramid was built, suggesting these passages may have served as symbolic pathways for the pharaoh's spirit to reach the stars. The Queen's Chamber itself, located at the end of a horizontal passage branching from the Grand Gallery, presents its own mysteries. The chamber features a corbelled ceiling similar to the Grand Gallery above, and a niche in its eastern wall that may have held a statue. The floor was found unfinished, with rough-cut stones unlike the smooth surfaces elsewhere in the pyramid's interior. These internal spaces, carved and constructed with such precision and effort, remind us that the pyramids were far more than simple monuments. They were machines of transformation in the ancient Egyptian understanding, spaces designed to facilitate the pharaoh's journey from earthly ruler to divine being among the stars. Every passage, every chamber, every architectural feature served purposes both practical and spiritual, creating a three-dimensional diagram of beliefs about death and rebirth. As we prepare to emerge from these stone interiors, returning to the bright sunlight of the Egyptian day, we carry with us an appreciation for the complexity hidden within these seemingly solid mountains. The passages and chambers within the pyramids reveal planning and execution that rivals their external construction, spaces crafted with equal care whether seen by human eyes or not. As we emerge from the shadowy corridors and climb down from the silent chambers deep within the stone giants, we find ourselves contemplating a question that has echoed through millennia. What treasures did these vast monuments once hold? The pyramids, built with such extraordinary effort and precision, were designed as eternal resting places for the pharaohs and their worldly possessions. Yet when modern explorers first entered these ancient tombs, they found mostly emptiness and silence. The story of what happened inside the pyramids after their construction is, in many ways, as fascinating as the story of how they were built. When the Great Pyramid was officially opened in the 9th century by Caliph Al-Ma'mun and his workers, who tunneled through solid limestone to bypass the original sealed entrance, they expected to find magnificent treasures. Instead, They discovered empty passages leading to an empty chamber. The granite sarcophagus in the king's chamber stood open and vacant, its heavy lid long since removed or destroyed. This scene of emptiness has repeated itself throughout the history of pyramid exploration. The massive stone coffins that remain inside these monuments are almost universally empty, their contents removed thousands of years ago. But the story these empty chambers tell is not one of disappointment. Rather, it speaks to the incredible value that these tombs once held, and to the determined individuals who risked severe punishment to claim those riches. Archaeological evidence suggests that tomb robbery was not a modern phenomenon, nor even a practice that began centuries after the pyramids were sealed. Some pyramids appear to have been violated within decades of their completion, and possibly even during periods when the mortuary cults established to maintain them were still active. The pyramid complex of Pharaoh Sahur at Abu Sir, built in the 25th century BCE, shows evidence of ancient repairs to areas where thieves had broken through, suggesting that robbery and restoration occurred in cycles throughout antiquity. The few artifacts that have survived the millennia of plundering offer tantalizing hints about what was lost. In some of the subsidiary pyramids at Giza, excavators have found fragments of furniture, pieces of alabaster vessels, and small items that somehow escaped the notice of ancient thieves. These remnants suggest that the burial chambers once contained elaborate furnishings, ceremonial objects, and personal items meant to serve the deceased in the afterlife. One of the most significant finds within a pyramid came from a shaft tomb near the causeway of Khufu's pyramid, where archaeologist George Reisner discovered the burial equipment of Queen Hetepheres, mother of Khufu. Though the wooden objects had deteriorated and the jewelry had been stolen in antiquity, enough remained to reconstruct a magnificent bed canopy with gold-covered wood, elegant furniture, and beautiful carrying chairs. This discovery, found in what appears to have been a reburial after her original tomb was robbed, gives us a glimpse into the splendor that would have accompanied a royal burial. The pyramid of Pharaoh Djedkare Isisi, explored in the 19th century, yielded fragments of his mummy and pieces of his burial equipment, though the tomb had been thoroughly ransacked in ancient times. These small remnants, carefully studied by archaeologists, provide valuable information about mummification practices and burial customs during the Old Kingdom period. Later pyramids from the Middle Kingdom occasionally preserved more material, though still nothing approaching the wealth that surely accompanied these burials originally. The Pyramid of Amenemhat III at Hawara contained beautiful alabaster vessels and offerings, while excavations near other pyramid complexes have uncovered workshops where craftsmen prepared the precious items destined for royal tombs. The question of how ancient thieves managed to penetrate these supposedly impenetrable fortresses is itself a study in human determination and ingenuity. Despite the massive blocking stones that sealed passages, the hidden corridors meant to confuse intruders, and the severe penalties that awaited anyone caught desecrating a royal tomb, thieves found ways inside. Some tunneled around the blocking stones, creating the narrow shafts that modern explorers would later follow. Others somehow obtained knowledge of the internal layouts, suggesting that perhaps workers who helped build or seal the tombs may have shared information, willingly or otherwise. The ancient Egyptians themselves were well aware of the threat of tomb robbery. We know this because they continuously modified their security measures, creating increasingly complex internal designs meant to deter thieves. False passages, hidden chambers, and misleading architectural features all speak to an ongoing battle between those trying to protect the tombs and those determined to violate them. The bent corridor in some pyramids, the massive portcullis blocks designed to crash down and seal passages, and the concealed entrances all represent attempts to outsmart potential robbers. Yet despite all these precautions, the thieves generally won. The wealth of ancient Egypt's royal tombs proved too tempting, and the passage of time inevitably weakened the security systems. When central authority collapsed during periods of instability, such as the first intermediate period following the Old Kingdom, organized tomb robbery appears to have become almost systematic, with the stolen materials melted down or sold, erasing almost all physical evidence of the treasures that once lay within the pyramids. The irony is that the very emptiness of these chambers has helped preserve the pyramids themselves. Had they remained filled with gold and precious materials, later generations might have dismantled them entirely in search of wealth. Instead, finding nothing but stone, they left the massive structures largely intact, though many pyramids did lose their fine limestone casing stones to builders seeking ready-cut materials for other projects. What the empty chambers cannot take away is the evidence of the burial practices themselves. The sarcophagi, carved from single blocks of granite or basalt and polished to a fine finish, demonstrate the skill of ancient craftsmen. The intricate passage systems reveal sophisticated architectural planning. And the few remaining fragments of burial equipment, studied carefully by modern archaeologists using advanced techniques, continue to yield information about the religious beliefs and daily lives of ancient Egypt's rulers. As we stand in these silent, empty rooms, deep beneath tons of carefully placed stone, we can imagine the moment when a pharaoh was laid to rest, surrounded by everything he might need for eternity, while priests performed the final rituals and workers sealed the passages behind them. We can picture the centuries that followed, with guards maintaining watch and mortuary priests making offerings, until eventually the guards disappeared and the temples fell silent, leaving these treasures vulnerable to those who valued gold more than eternal rest. The treasures are gone, but the chambers remain, waiting patiently in darkness, ready to share their secrets with those who come seeking knowledge rather than gold. The Giza Plateau, magnificent as it is, represents only a fraction of Egypt's pyramid-building legacy. As we leave behind the empty chambers and ransack tombs of the Great Pyramids, our journey takes us beyond these famous monuments to discover dozens of other pyramids scattered along the Nile Valley. Each tells its own story of ambition, innovation, and the evolving relationship between pharaohs and their eternal resting places. The Pyramid Age truly spans centuries, beginning around 2630 BCE with Djoser's Step Pyramid and continuing through various dynasties until approximately 1550 BCE. During this remarkable period, Egyptian rulers commissioned over 100 pyramids, each reflecting the resources, beliefs, and engineering capabilities of its time. Some stand nearly as impressive as those at Giza, while others survive only as crumbling cores or sandy mounds that barely hint at their former grandeur. Just south of Giza lies Saqqara, a vast necropolis stretching for miles along the desert edge. Here, where Imhotep first experimented with stone construction, numerous pyramids dot the landscape. Beyond Djoser's pioneering Step Pyramid, the site contains structures from later dynasties, including several pyramids from the 5th and 6th dynasties. These later pyramids, built between 2500 and 2200 BCE, appear less impressive in size than their 4th dynasty predecessors, but they hold treasures of a different kind within their chambers. The walls of these pyramids bear inscriptions that would become known as the pyramid texts, transforming these monuments from silent stone masses into speaking testimonies of ancient beliefs. The journey northward from Saqqara brings us to Abusir, where 3 main pyramids from the 5th dynasty stand in various states of preservation. Built by Pharaoh Sahur, Neferikre, and Nusere around 2450 BCE, these structures demonstrate a shift in priorities. Slightly smaller than the Giza giants, they devoted more attention to the surrounding temple complexes and the elaborate relief carvings that decorated their walls. Archaeologists working at Abusir have uncovered papyrus archives that provide invaluable insights into the administration of these pyramid complexes, revealing how priests maintained the royal cults long after the pharaohs had departed this world. Traveling south from Giza instead, we arrive at Dashur, a site that witnessed some of ancient Egypt's most important architectural experiments. Here stand the pyramids we encountered earlier in our story, the Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid, both built by Pharaoh Snefru around 2600 BCE. But Dashur's significance extends beyond the Old Kingdom. Middle Kingdom pharaohs, ruling 1,000 years later, also chose this location for their monuments. The Pyramid of Amenemhat II, though now reduced to little more than rubble, once stood here with its distinctive black granite capstone. Nearby, the pyramids of Senusret III and Amenemhat III demonstrate how construction techniques had evolved, or perhaps declined, by the 19th century BCE. The Middle Kingdom pyramids present a fascinating contrast to their Old Kingdom predecessors. Built primarily with mud brick cores covered with limestone casings, these structures proved far less durable. Once their outer stones were removed by later builders seeking ready-made construction materials, the mud brick interiors quickly deteriorated. Today, many Middle Kingdom pyramids resemble natural hills more than artificial monuments. Yet they reveal important information about changing economic conditions and religious practices. The elaborate internal passages and security features within these pyramids, including complex sliding doors and dead-end corridors, suggest growing concerns about tomb robbery and an increasingly desperate attempt to protect royal burials. At Lisht, near the entrance to the Fayum region, stand the pyramids of Amenemhat I and his son Senusret I, founders of the 12th dynasty around 1950 BCE. These pharaohs deliberately positioned their pyramids to mark a new beginning for Egypt after a period of political fragmentation. The pyramids at Lisht incorporated blocks recycled from Old Kingdom monuments, a practice that modern archaeologists find both frustrating and fascinating. On one hand, it destroyed earlier structures. On the other, it demonstrates continuity with the past and practical resource management during a period when long-distance quarrying had become more challenging. Further south, at Hawara and Lahan, the later Middle Kingdom pharaohs continued building pyramids, though with increasingly complex internal designs. Amenemhat III's pyramid at Hawara once featured an elaborate mortuary temple so intricate that Greek visitors centuries later called it the labyrinth. Though almost nothing remains of this legendary structure today, ancient descriptions suggest it contained thousands of rooms and countless passages, serving both religious and administrative functions. The progression of pyramid construction reveals much about Egypt's changing fortunes. The massive stone pyramids of the 4th dynasty required tremendous resources, centralized authority, and efficient administration. As Egypt's political landscape shifted, pyramid construction adapted accordingly. Later pyramids might lack the massive scale of earlier monuments, but they often featured more sophisticated internal architecture and richer decoration in their associated temples and causeways. Some pyramids never reached completion, their abandoned forms providing valuable evidence about construction sequences. At Zawayat El Aryan, between Giza and Arbusir, an unfinished pyramid reveals the earliest stages of construction, with its descending corridor and burial chamber excavated into bedrock but the superstructure barely begun. Such monuments remind us that not every pharaoh enjoyed a long reign or the stability necessary to complete their eternal home. The quality and ambition of pyramid construction generally declined after the Old Kingdom, though pharaohs continued building these monuments for centuries. By the end of the Middle Kingdom around 1650 BCE, pyramid building had largely ceased in northern Egypt. The tradition briefly continued in the south, where the rulers of Kush, in what is now Sudan, built smaller steep-sided pyramids over their burials from around 700 BCE until the 4th century CE, demonstrating the lasting influence of Egyptian architectural traditions. Each pyramid site offers its own character and mysteries. Some stand in relatively good condition, their internal chambers accessible to modern visitors. Others survive only as foundations or scattered blocks being slowly reclaimed by desert sands. Together, they form a timeline of architectural achievement, religious devotion, and royal ambition spanning more than 1,000 years of Egyptian civilization. As we prepare to explore the sacred texts and spiritual beliefs that gave meaning to these monuments, we carry with us the understanding that the pyramids represent not just Giza's famous trio, but an entire landscape of eternal architecture. Each pharaoh who commissioned a pyramid sought to secure their place among the stars, leaving behind stone testimonies to human determination and the timeless desire to transcend mortality. As we journey beyond the great monuments of Giza and the other pyramid fields scattered across Egypt's desert landscape, we find ourselves drawn to something equally remarkable, though far more delicate than the massive stones themselves. For while the earliest pyramids stood silent and bare, their surfaces smooth and unadorned, later generations of pyramid builders chose to fill their monuments with words. These words, carved carefully into stone walls deep within chambers where few living souls would ever venture, represent humanity's oldest religious texts, a bridge between the world of stone and the world of spirit. The transformation began during the reign of Pharaoh Unas, the last ruler of Egypt's 5th dynasty, around 2350 BCE. When archaeologists first entered his pyramid at Saqqara in the 1880s, they discovered something unprecedented. The walls of the burial chamber and adjoining rooms were covered with vertical columns of hieroglyphic text, painted in blue-green pigment that still retained its color after more than 4,000 years. These inscriptions, now known as the pyramid texts, would set a pattern followed by pharaohs for generations to come. The discovery sent waves of excitement through the scholarly world. Here, preserved in stone, were the actual words and prayers that ancient Egyptians believed would guide their king through the perilous journey after death. No longer were pyramids merely architectural achievements. They had become books, written in chambers of stone, their pages meant to be read by divine eyes in the darkness. The texts themselves reveal a complex and layered understanding of the afterlife, one that had clearly developed over many centuries before anyone thought to write it down. The spells and utterances speak of transformation and ascension, of the pharaoh becoming one with the gods, traveling through the sky as a star, sailing in the solar boat with Ra across the heavens. Some passages describe practical concerns, providing the deceased king with food and drink, protecting him from serpents and other dangers lurking in the realm of the dead. Other sections saw into poetic imagery that remains powerful even in translation. One particularly evocative passage describes the pharaoh ascending to the sky on a ladder formed by the gods themselves, while another depicts him as a falcon, breaking free from his earthly body to fly among the imperishable stars. The ancient scribes who composed these texts drew upon a rich vocabulary of metaphor and symbol, weaving together references to nature, mythology, and ritual observance into a tapestry meant to ensure the king's eternal existence. The hieroglyphic script itself carries a certain visual poetry. Each symbol, whether representing a sound, a word, or an idea, was carefully carved and then filled with pigment. Owls and vultures, water ripples and reed leaves, human figures in various poses, all marched in orderly columns down the limestone walls. The artisans who created these inscriptions worked in cramped spaces, often by lamplight, their copper chisels tapping rhythmically against stone as they transformed royal theology into permanent form. After Unas, subsequent rulers of the 6th dynasty adopted and expanded this practice. The pyramids of Teti, Pipi I, Merenra, and Pipi II all contained their own versions of the pyramid texts, each differing slightly in the selection and arrangement of spells. Later still, queens began to have similar texts inscribed in their smaller pyramids, adapted to address a female royal person rather than a male king. This expansion suggests that the power of these sacred words was considered too valuable to restrict only to pharaohs. Scholars have identified over 800 distinct utterances within the complete corpus of pyramid texts, though no single pyramid contains all of them. Some spells appear in nearly every pyramid, suggesting they were considered essential. Others appear only once or twice, perhaps representing family traditions or regional variations in religious practice. The texts were not organized like a modern book with a clear beginning, middle, and end. Instead, they formed a collection, a spiritual toolkit from which selections could be made according to need and preference. The language of the pyramid texts presents its own mysteries. Written in Old Egyptian, the earliest stage of the Egyptian language that we can read, the texts sometimes contain words and phrases that appear archaic even by the standards of their own time. This suggests that some of the material being inscribed was already ancient when it was first carved into stone, passed down through oral tradition from an even earlier era. Priests and scribes were committing to permanent form beliefs that may have originated in a shadowy predynastic period before written records began. Reading these texts today requires patience and imagination. The ancient Egyptian worldview differs significantly from modern ways of thinking. The boundaries between the living and the dead, between gods and humans, between the physical and spiritual realms, were understood differently. The pyramid texts assume a universe filled with divine forces, where words themselves held creative power, where knowing the true name of something gave one authority over it, where the spoken spell could accomplish real transformation. Some of the most intriguing passages involve what scholars call the democratization of the afterlife. While the pyramid texts were initially exclusive to royalty, they contain within them hints of broader application. Certain spells address concerns that any person might have about death and what comes after. This universalizing tendency would continue and expand in later centuries, when modified versions of these royal texts would be painted on the coffins of nobles and officials, and eventually evolve into the famous Book of the Dead, available to anyone who could afford a copy. The physical preservation of these texts represents yet another engineering achievement. The builders had to ensure that the chambers containing inscriptions remained intact and dry enough to protect the carved surfaces. The choice of which walls to inscribe and which to leave bare followed patterns that suggest careful planning and religious significance. In some pyramids, only the burial chamber received texts. In others, antechambers and corridors also carried inscriptions, creating a progression of sacred words through which the deceased would symbolically pass. Modern visitors to these pyramids, when access is permitted, can still witness these ancient words. Standing in chambers where pharaohs were laid to rest more than 4 millennia ago, one can see the hieroglyphs marching up the walls, their blue-green pigment faded but still visible in places. The experience connects us directly to the people who carved these symbols, who believed they were creating something of eternal importance, a roadmap for the journey beyond death itself. The pyramid texts remain invaluable to Egyptologists, not merely as religious documents but as windows into the broader culture of the Old Kingdom. References within the spells mention cities, temples, rituals, and beliefs that help us reconstruct a vanished world. They preserve fragments of myths that would otherwise be lost, mention gods whose worship has long since ceased, describe ceremonies that no living person has witnessed for thousands of years. As we prepare to move forward in our exploration, examining the practical tools that made these monuments possible, we carry with us the knowledge that pyramids were never merely piles of stone. They were vessels of meaning, containers for humanity's deepest questions about mortality and transcendence, their silent walls whispering ancient prayers into the darkness. As we leave behind the sacred words carved into pyramid walls, we turn our attention to something equally fascinating yet more tangible, the actual implements that made these magnificent structures possible. The tools that shaped the pyramids were not born of mystery or magic, but of copper, stone, and wood. They were held in calloused hands, wielded with practiced skill, and occasionally broken or worn down to be replaced or resharpened. These were the everyday instruments that transformed vision into reality, one chip of stone at a time. The ancient Egyptian toolbox was surprisingly modest by modern standards, yet remarkably effective. At the heart of pyramid construction lay the copper chisel, perhaps the most important tool in the builder's arsenal. Egypt's access to copper ore from the Sinai Peninsula provided the raw material for these essential implements. Workers would heat and hammer the copper into blades of various sizes, creating chisels ranging from small, precise instruments for detail work to larger, heavy-duty tools for rougher quarrying tasks. These copper tools had limitations that modern steel users might find frustrating. Copper is a relatively soft metal, and a chisel striking hard limestone or granite would quickly lose its edge. Archaeological evidence from quarry sites shows us that workers needed frequent breaks not for rest alone, but to resharpen their tools. Teams would have included specialists whose primary task was maintaining the sharpness of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of chisels. The rhythmic sound of hammering on copper would have been as constant as the chip of stone breaking away from the rock face. For the harder stones, particularly granite, copper alone often proved insufficient. Here, the ancient builders employed a clever combination of techniques. They used dolerite pounders, extremely hard, rounded stones that could be gripped in two hands and brought down repeatedly onto the granite surface. The archaeological record preserves thousands of these pounders, worn smooth from use, found scattered throughout quarry sites. The technique required patience and persistence, with workers essentially pulverizing their way through the stone rather than cutting it cleanly. It was exhausting work, but effective, and it left characteristic patterns that we can still identify on ancient stone surfaces today. Wooden tools played roles that might surprise us. The ancient Egyptians created wooden sledges, essentially large sleds, to transport the massive stone blocks. Archaeological excavations have uncovered actual examples of these sledges, their runners worn from dragging across sand and ramp surfaces. The wood itself came primarily from local acacia and tamarisk trees, though larger projects sometimes imported more substantial timber from Lebanon. These sledges weren't elaborate, just sturdy platforms with runners designed to distribute weight and reduce friction. The genius of the sledge system became apparent when combined with another simple technology, water. Evidence suggests that workers would wet the sand in front of the sledge, reducing friction dramatically. Modern experiments have confirmed that this technique can reduce the force needed to move heavy loads by as much as half. A wall painting from the tomb of Jehuti-Hotep, though from a later period, shows workers pouring liquid in front of a sledge carrying a colossal statue, providing our clearest visual evidence of this practice. Rope was the construction site's connective tissue, quite literally. Egyptian rope makers created strong cordage from halfa grass and palm fiber, twisting and braiding them into cables capable of bearing enormous loads. The wear patterns on stone blocks show us where ropes were positioned, and some stones still bear the copper staples that helped secure the ropes in place. The making of rope was itself a specialized craft, requiring knowledge of materials, tension, and braiding patterns that would prevent unraveling under stress. For measuring and achieving the pyramid's remarkable precision, the Egyptians relied on elegantly simple instruments. The merkit, a wooden tool similar to a plumb line, helped establish true vertical and horizontal planes. By aligning two merkits with a particular star, surveyors could establish a perfect north-south line. The bay, a palm rib with a notch cut at one end, served as a basic leveling instrument. When combined with a plumb bob, it allowed workers to check if a surface was truly level, a critical requirement when laying foundation stones or checking the alignment of each pyramid course. The cubit rod was the fundamental unit of measurement, based on the length from elbow to fingertip. Royal cubit rods, made of wood or stone and marked with precise divisions, have survived from ancient times, showing us that the Egyptians standardized their measurements across vast construction projects. These weren't rough approximations but carefully maintained standards, essential for coordinating work among different teams and ensuring that blocks cut in distant quarries would fit precisely into their designated places. Square levels and set squares, constructed from wood and checked for accuracy, helped masons achieve right angles and level surfaces. Some of these tools have been found in tombs of craftsmen, buried with them as marks of their profession. The care taken in creating and maintaining these measuring instruments reflects an understanding that precision in small tools would translate to accuracy in enormous structures. For marking and planning, workers used copper or bronze saws, though these were more effective for cutting wood than stone. Evidence of saw marks appears on wooden tools and structural elements, showing controlled, even cuts. When cutting stone, saws were often used in combination with an abrasive material, likely quartz sand, which acted as the actual cutting agent while the saw blade provided the motion and direction. Hammers came in various forms, from small wooden mallets for driving copper chisels to larger stone mauls for heavier percussion work. The handles were typically wood, fitted into the stone or secured with leather bindings. The balance and weight distribution of these tools mattered greatly for workers who would spend hours each day wielding them. A poorly balanced hammer would cause fatigue and reduce efficiency. A well-made one became an extension of the worker's arm. Levers and rockers made of wood allowed workers to position blocks with precision once they were nearly in place. Short, controlled movements could shift blocks weighing several tons, raising one edge slightly to slip packing stones underneath, or pivoting a block to adjust its alignment. These simple machines multiplied human force effectively, allowing relatively small teams to manipulate enormous weights. The absence of iron, which wouldn't become common in Egypt until much later, meant that every tool had to work within the constraints of Bronze Age metallurgy and available materials. Yet within these constraints, Egyptian craftsmen achieved remarkable results. Their tools were not primitive but appropriate, refined through generations of use and improvement. Each tool represented accumulated knowledge, passed from master to apprentice, adapted and perfected over centuries. As we consider these implements, held in hands that have long since returned to dust, we connect with the human reality of pyramid construction. These were not mysterious devices but practical solutions to specific problems. And as new archaeological methods reveal ever more about these ancient monuments, it is often the simple tools, the everyday implements, that provide our clearest windows into how impossible dreams became stone reality. The ancient pyramids stood silent for millennia, keeping their secrets close while sand and wind swept across their limestone faces. For thousands of years, human understanding of these monuments relied on careful observation, measurement with simple tools, and the painstaking work of excavation with picks and brushes. But in recent decades, something remarkable has happened. Modern technology has given us new eyes to see what lies hidden within and beneath the stone, revealing secrets that the ancient builders concealed from view. In the early years of the 21st century, archaeologists began employing ground-penetrating radar to scan the sandy plateau around the pyramids. This technology works by sending radio waves into the earth and measuring how they bounce back, creating images of what lies buried beneath the surface without disturbing a single grain of sand. The results have been illuminating in ways no one quite expected. Beneath the seemingly empty desert around the Giza pyramids, the radar revealed a network of tunnels, chambers, and structures that had been completely buried by thousands of years of wind-blown sand. Some of these underground passages appear to connect various parts of the pyramid complex in ways that weren't visible from surface exploration alone. The technology has proven particularly valuable in locating the remains of workers' ramps and construction causeways that had been dismantled or buried after the pyramids were completed. These findings have helped archaeologists better understand the logistics of pyramid construction, confirming some theories while challenging others that had been held for decades. Perhaps one of the most exciting technological developments came in 2017, when an international team of scientists used cosmic ray imaging to peer inside the Great Pyramid itself. This technique, called muon radiography, detects particles called muons that constantly rain down on Earth from space. These particles can pass through stone, but their paths are slightly altered by the density of the material they encounter. By placing detectors inside the pyramid and measuring the muons that pass through from different angles, scientists can create images of what's inside the structure without drilling a single hole or removing a single stone. The result stunned the archaeological community. The scans revealed a previously unknown void above the Grand Gallery, a space at least 100 feet long. The purpose of this void remains a mystery. Some researchers suggest it might be a structural feature designed to reduce the weight pressing down on the Grand Gallery below. Others wonder if it could be a hidden chamber that was sealed before the pyramid was completed. The beauty of the technology is that it allows scientists to know something is there without the need to destructively investigate, preserving the integrity of this ancient monument while still advancing our knowledge. Three-dimensional laser scanning has revolutionized how archaeologists document and study the pyramids. Surveyors can now capture millions of precise measurements in a matter of hours, creating digital models so accurate that they reveal details invisible to the naked eye. These scans have shown that the base of the Great Pyramid is not quite perfectly square, with variations of a few inches across its 750-foot length, and that the structure has settled slightly over the millennia, creating subtle curves and deformations that tell the story of how the pyramid has aged. These detailed digital models serve another purpose beyond pure research. They create a permanent record of the pyramid's current condition, allowing future generations to track any changes or deterioration. In a world where pollution, climate change, and the pressures of tourism all take their toll on ancient monuments, having precise baseline measurements becomes increasingly valuable. Infrared thermography has offered another window into the pyramid's hidden nature. By measuring tiny variations in temperature across the surface of the stones, archaeologists have detected anomalies that might indicate hollow spaces, different types of stone, or areas where the internal structure differs from what's expected. In 2015, thermal scanning of the Great Pyramid revealed several blocks at the base that remained warmer than their neighbors as night fell, suggesting that these stones might have spaces behind them or be made of different material. While investigations continue, such anomalies remind us that even the most studied monument on Earth still holds surprises. Chemical analysis of the mortar between the pyramid blocks has revealed information about the construction timeline. By examining slight variations in the composition of the mortar from different parts of the pyramid, researchers have been able to determine that the work proceeded in distinct phases, possibly corresponding to different construction seasons or changes in the supply of raw materials. This kind of detailed analysis would have been impossible just a generation ago. Satellite imagery and aerial photography using drones have transformed how archaeologists survey the broader landscape around the pyramids. From above, patterns invisible from ground level become clear. Ancient roads and pathways worn into the bedrock, the outlines of structures long since collapsed and buried, and the relationship between different parts of the pyramid complex all reveal themselves to the patient observer studying high-resolution images. In some cases, these aerial surveys have led to the discovery of pyramids that had been completely buried beneath sand and rubble, their existence forgotten for centuries. DNA analysis of human remains found in the workers' cemeteries has provided insights into where the pyramid builders came from. The genetic evidence confirms that the workers were native Egyptians, drawn from communities all along the Nile, rather than foreign slaves as earlier theories had sometimes suggested. This biological evidence complements the archaeological record, painting a fuller picture of the diverse workforce that gathered to build these monuments. Advanced photography techniques, including reflected ultraviolet fluorescence, have revealed traces of paint and markings on stones that are no longer visible to the naked eye. These marks sometimes include quarry numbers, construction notes, or even casual graffiti left by ancient workers. Each discovery adds another small detail to our understanding of how the construction was organized and who was involved. The combination of all these technologies has created something unprecedented in archaeology, a constantly evolving, increasingly detailed picture of the pyramids that grows richer with each passing year. Questions that seemed impossible to answer without destructive excavation can now be investigated through non-invasive means. Theories can be tested against precise measurements and imaging data. And mysteries that have puzzled humanity for thousands of years are finally beginning to yield their secrets to patient, careful scientific investigation. As we rest in the quiet darkness, considering these technological marvels being used to study ancient ones, there's something deeply satisfying about the continuity of human curiosity. The same impulse that drove the ancient Egyptians to reach toward the sky with their pyramids now drives modern scientists to develop ever more sophisticated ways of understanding what those ancient builders achieved. The conversation between past and present continues, facilitated by technology but motivated by the timeless human desire to understand, to know, and to connect with those who came before us. The desert night settles softly around us as we turn our attention to the many questions that have swirled around the pyramids for centuries, like sand caught in an eternal wind. After exploring the solid archaeological evidence and modern discoveries, we now find ourselves in the fascinating territory where curiosity meets skepticism, where wonder sometimes outpaces evidence, and where the most remarkable truth of all is that human beings built these monuments with their own hands. Let us begin with perhaps the most persistent question of all. How could ancient people, without modern machinery, possibly construct something so precise and massive? This question, asked in genuine wonder by millions of visitors standing before the Great Pyramid, has led to numerous alternative explanations over the years. Some have proposed that the pyramids must be far older than archaeologists claim, perhaps tens of thousands of years old. Yet the evidence tells a different story. The pyramids fit precisely within the archaeological record of ancient Egypt, surrounded by datable artifacts, pottery, tools, and organic materials that all point to the same era around 2500 BCE. The workers' villages we explored earlier, the hieroglyphic records, the evolution of pyramid design from simple mastabas to the towering structures at Giza, all form a coherent timeline that would be impossible to fabricate. The precision of the pyramids has sparked particular fascination. The Great Pyramid's base is level to within just a few centimeters across its massive span, and its sides align closely with the cardinal directions. This remarkable accuracy has led some to wonder whether such precision required knowledge or technology beyond what we attribute to the ancient Egyptians. Yet when we look carefully at the evidence, we find that the Egyptians possessed sophisticated surveying techniques using tools like the merkit, essentially a sighting instrument similar to an astrolabe, and plumb bobs weighted with stone. By observing the stars, particularly the circumpolar stars that never set below the horizon, they could determine true north with impressive accuracy. The mathematics required, while complex, was well within the grasp of Egyptian architects who left behind papyri demonstrating their understanding of geometry and calculation. Some have suggested that the massive blocks were too heavy to move with ancient technology, proposing alternative methods ranging from the plausible to the fantastical. We know from experimental archaeology that teams of workers pulling sledges on wetted sand could indeed move multi-ton blocks. The Egyptians themselves left behind paintings showing exactly this method, and modern experiments have successfully replicated the technique. The transportation of the massive granite blocks from Aswan, while certainly challenging, was accomplished using Nile barges during the flood season when the river rose close to the construction sites. These explanations require no mysterious lost knowledge, only the intelligent application of available technology and significant human effort. The notion that the pyramids encoded advanced mathematical constants like pi has captured many imaginations. If you divide the perimeter of the Great Pyramid by twice its height, you do indeed get a number close to pi. However, this relationship emerges naturally from the pyramid's slope angle, which the Egyptians chose for practical and aesthetic reasons based on their traditional seeked measurement system. They were measuring slopes in palms and cubits, not calculating transcendental numbers. This is not to diminish their achievement, but rather to appreciate how their practical building knowledge led to mathematically elegant results without requiring theoretical mathematics that wouldn't be developed for thousands of years. Questions about the purpose of the pyramids have also generated alternative theories. While the archaeological consensus, based on extensive evidence, identifies pyramids as royal tombs and part of the pharaoh's funerary complex, some have proposed they served as astronomical observatories, power plants, or repositories of ancient wisdom. The internal passages do align with certain stars, but this astronomical connection relates to the religious beliefs about the pharaoh's afterlife journey, not astronomical observation as a primary function. The pyramid texts we encountered earlier make the religious purpose quite clear, describing in detail the deceased king's transformation and ascension to join the gods. The absence of mummies in the pyramids when they were first explored in modern times has puzzled some observers. Yet we know that tomb robbery was rampant in ancient Egypt, often occurring within generations of a pyramid's completion. The empty sarcophagus in the Great Pyramid tells us that robbers succeeded in their work, not that no burial ever took place. Ancient Egyptian texts frequently reference the problem of tomb robbery, and later pharaohs tried different strategies, eventually leading to the hidden tombs in the Valley of the Kings. There are those who point to the difficulty of the work and wonder whether ancient Egyptians were truly willing to dedicate such effort to these projects. This perspective sometimes underestimates both the organizational capacity of the Egyptian state and the religious motivation that pervaded their society. For the ancient Egyptians, ensuring the pharaoh's successful journey to the afterlife was not merely a royal vanity project but a cosmic necessity that ensured the continuation of Ma'at, the divine order that kept chaos at bay and the Nile flooding on schedule. Workers who participated in building the pyramid were not slaves toiling hopelessly, as we've learned, but organized teams of workers who took pride in their contribution, left graffiti marking their crew's achievements, and received compensation for their labor. The sheer abundance of theories and questions surrounding the pyramid speaks to something profound about human nature. We find it difficult to accept that our ancestors, without computers or engines, accomplished something we ourselves would struggle to replicate today. Yet this difficulty says more about our modern dependence on technology than about ancient capabilities. The Egyptians had something we often lack: time, patience, detailed planning, and the ability to coordinate thousands of people toward a single goal over decades. They had skilled craftsmen whose entire lives were dedicated to mastering their trade, passing knowledge from generation to generation. Modern attempts to explain the pyramids with alternative theories often overlook the most astonishing explanation of all, the one supported by evidence, that human beings, working with copper tools and rope, with careful planning and tremendous dedication, really did quarry millions of stones, transport them across the desert, and raise them into mountains that have lasted 45 centuries. This truth is more wondrous than any alternative because it reveals the extraordinary potential of human cooperation, ingenuity, and determination. As we rest here in the quiet darkness, we can appreciate that the mysteries of the pyramids are not mysteries of impossible origin, but rather invitations to marvel at what humans can achieve when vision, knowledge, and effort align. The evidence lies scattered across the Egyptian desert: the quarry marks, the workers' villages, the experimental pyramids that show learning and adaptation, the tools left behind, and the pyramids themselves, standing as testimony to the triumph of human capability. As the stars turn overhead in the same patterns that guided ancient surveyors to align their monuments, the pyramids continue their silent watch over the Egyptian desert. 4,500 years have passed since workers laid the final capstones atop these mountains of limestone, yet the pyramids remain among the most recognizable silhouettes on Earth. Their endurance speaks not just to the skill of their builders, but to something deeper about humanity's desire to create works that transcend our brief time on this planet. The pyramids have never stood in isolation from the world. Even in ancient times, they drew visitors from across the known world. Greek travelers marveled at them when they were already more ancient to the Greeks than the Greeks are to us today. Herodotus walked among them in the 5th century BCE, recording stories and attempting to understand their construction. The historian's writings, though mixed with local legends and misunderstandings, preserved knowledge that might otherwise have been lost to time. The Romans came too, leaving their own graffiti on pyramid walls, adding their marks to structures that had already witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties. Throughout the medieval period, the pyramids inspired awe and speculation. Arab scholars studied them with scientific curiosity, measuring their dimensions and pondering their purposes. Some believed they were granaries, built by the biblical Joseph to store grain during the years of plenty. The limestone casing stones that once gave the pyramids their smooth, gleaming surfaces were gradually removed and repurposed to build the mosques and palaces of Cairo. This transformation connected ancient engineering to medieval architecture, allowing the pyramids to live on in new forms throughout the growing city. When European explorers rediscovered Egypt for Western audiences during the Age of Enlightenment and the Napoleonic expeditions, the pyramids captured imaginations anew. Artists sketched them, scientists measured them, and adventurers tunneled into them seeking treasure and mystery. Napoleon himself reportedly spent time alone in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid, though what he experienced there, if anything, remained his secret. The measurements taken by French scholars during this period contributed to the birth of Egyptology as a formal discipline. The pyramids influenced architecture far beyond Egypt's borders. Their geometric perfection appealed to designers across cultures and centuries. When Europe and America embraced neoclassical design, pyramid forms appeared in monuments and buildings. The Washington Monument echoes their shape. Art Deco designers in the 20th century drew inspiration from their clean lines and monumental presence. Even modern corporate logos and luxury hotels borrow the pyramid's instantly recognizable silhouette, testament to its continuing power as a symbol. For modern Egypt, the pyramids represent both heritage and aspiration. They appear on currency, in official emblems, and in countless representations of national identity. They stand as proof that Egyptian civilization achieved greatness that commands global respect, a source of pride that connects contemporary Egyptians to their ancestors across millennia. Tourism centered on these ancient wonders provides livelihood for millions, creating a living relationship between past and present. Yet the pyramids also pose ongoing challenges. Urban expansion brings Cairo ever closer to the Giza plateau. Air pollution and groundwater changes threaten the limestone that has endured for so long. Conservation efforts balance the desire to understand these monuments through research against the need to preserve them for future generations. Each decision about access, restoration, or study involves weighing competing interests and values. The questions the pyramids raise continue to drive investigation and debate. How exactly were they built remains a topic of research, with new evidence and theories emerging regularly. What motivated their construction beyond the obvious religious purposes? How did ancient Egyptian society organize itself to accomplish such monumental tasks without the technologies we consider essential today? These questions matter because their answers illuminate fundamental aspects of human capability and social organization. Perhaps most profoundly, the pyramids challenge our assumptions about progress. We often imagine history as a steady march toward greater knowledge and capability, yet here stand structures that remain difficult to replicate even with modern equipment. The ancient Egyptians possessed knowledge we're still working to fully understand, achieved precision we struggle to match, and organized labor forces with an effectiveness that seems remarkable even by contemporary standards. They remind us that intelligence, determination, and careful planning can overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. The mystery surrounding certain aspects of the pyramids enhances rather than diminishes their significance. We may never know every detail of their construction, every ritual performed within their chambers, every thought that passed through the minds of those who built them. This uncertainty leaves room for wonder, for imagination, for the recognition that some human achievements transcend complete explanation. The pyramids invite us to contemplate what we might accomplish if we could combine ancient patience and dedication with modern knowledge and tools. Standing before the pyramids at sunset, as the golden light washes across their ancient stones and shadows lengthen across the desert, visitors from every nation and background find themselves united in awe. These structures speak a universal language of human ambition, skill, and the desire to create something lasting. They remind us that people who lived millennia ago were not so different from ourselves. They loved, feared, hoped, and dreamed. They worked together toward common goals. They looked up at the same stars and wondered about their place in the cosmos. The pyramids will continue standing long after we're gone, monuments not just to the pharaohs whose names they bear, but to all the workers whose names we'll never know. They honor the vision of architects, the skill of stonemasons, the strength of laborious, the precision of surveyors. They represent what humans can achieve when we work together toward something greater than ourselves. As the desert night falls and stars emerge in the darkness above these ancient stones, the pyramids keep their eternal vigil, bridging past and future, earth and sky, mortality and the dream of something that endures. As we bring to a close our journey through the ancient sands of Egypt, where pharaohs raised monuments to touch the sky and skilled hand-shaped stone into eternal wonders, we hope these stories have gently carried you through the evening. Thank you for joining us on this peaceful exploration of these magnificent pyramids and the civilization that built them. If these calm adventures have brought you comfort, we'd love to have you with us again. Please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below to help other smart sleepers find their way to restful nights. And now, as the night deepens and your mind settles like desert sand after the wind, we wish you the sweetest of dreams. Good night, fellow dreamer, and may your sleep be restful and your dreams be kind.